Welcome to Norse Code, the #1 podcast for you Minnesota Vikings. I'm your host and producer. My name is James Pagashnik. Thank you guys so much for listening. And at the other end of the tin cannon string, we have our analyst and co-host. You know him from numerous blogs and podcasts around the internet, most notably from the Wide Left Substack. He is Mr. Useful Human, Arif Hassan. Arif, in addition to Christian Ponder, sucks, is there a favorite motto of the show that you that you like take to heart over the past 10 years and now 500 episodes?
Man, Christian Ponder sucks was like a good one. That was a classic. The Vikings are not to be trusted. That's a good one. It's like only a couple years old. What, like 3 years old?
Yep.
Yeah. I don't remember a lot of them. I just know I don't like the current one. There was a Matt Khalil one, right?
If there was a Matt Khalil one, I don't recall it, but I am pretty partial to try to put it in the garage.
Demand greatness or something, or whatever he was saying that the Carolina Panthers got out of him.
There was Spoons Up. We did Spoons Up for a while, and there was for Cincinnati Gorilla. Because why not? Yeah, there was Spoons Up. There was Don't Forget Your Wine Towel, or Always Remember to Bring Your Wine Towel.
Yeah.
That one went on for a bit. Yeah, Demand Greatness might have been a Khalil one. That sounds about right.
Or Demand Excellence or something like that.
Yeah, Demand Excellence, said Matt Khalil, the Turnstile.
Well, yeah, I mean, because they were at like a bunch of Carolina reporters were like, "Hey, so what's like different? Like, why are you gonna be good?" Is basically the question. Like, "Hey, so you were bad. Why should we trust that you're good?" They worded it a bit more delicately, but he said this is the first guy I've played for that kind of demands excellence from his offensive line room. And a bunch of Vikings fans are like, what?
Like, yeah, we were able to just show up in like t-shirt and jeans there. Like, sometimes we had craft days. Like, sometimes they brought out the safety scissors. It was great. Demand excellence. I had forgotten about that one. That was a good one. That was a good one for a while. Well, welcome to this episode, which is episode 500 of Norse Code. We hope you all are doing well. And we did a bit of celebrating this year earlier this year when we had our 10-year anniversary. So we're not going to be really going all out, but we do have a wide-ranging mailbag that we'll be going into later that has a bit more information, or say a bit more like outliers on some of the crazier stuff that we've been involved in, or like looks back and all that. But we're pleased to be a part of your podcast listening schedule and have been for now 500 episodes. Arif, I'm sorry.
I'm sorry. Jesus Christ.
You've been on all of them. I've only been on the majority. Sometime around episode 200, 250, around 200 is when I switched over to be the full-time person. So,
I feel like it's inherently the case that I must be on all of them, but like, is that actually true?
No, that's actually true. We've never done an episode without you. There was an opportunity once when you slept in, and Dusty and I were like, well, we could do this and it'd be really funny. But we decided not.
We've never recorded in the morning, so the idea that I slept in for an episode is phenomenal.
That's not entirely accurate.
9 p.m. recording that I slept through.
We have recorded like 10 or 11, but like only once. And that was because of like my work schedule or something. It was, or, Dusty's ridiculous restaurant schedule.
Right.
I'd get a message, hey, can you edit the episode? And it's like 2 p.m. Like, why are you, why? Oh, what are you people doing?
All right, I've sent you the Pamela file. You should have it.
Like, I hate all of you. Why are you making me work? All right, fine. So again, welcome to the 500th episode. We're going to have a little bit of fun later in the episode. We have a game to discuss, which is less fun. The Vikings lost to the Bengals in, I want to say surprising fashion, but like not really. It this
I
the
mean,
rest.
the Bengals were favored by 3, right?
Yeah,
It's,
so this was about right. So we have that to go over, and we also have a fantastic mailbag. But before we start, thank you guys so much for listening to Norse Code. This is our 500th episode. In case you haven't heard it, we say it like 6 or 8 times. We really appreciate you guys listening to us. We really appreciate the support over the years, and the fact that we've been able to make it to this ridiculous mark is a sign that we should clearly be, either moving up in the world or moving down in the world, and I don't know which. But we will endeavor to persevere, and if you would like to help us out financially, you can do so in a couple of different ways. You can go over to patreon.com/NorseCode and donate there for $3.50 a month, or a little less for the yearly subscription. You get access to stuff like the Discord. You get access to some of the live stuff that we've been doing. You can go over to Norse Code on Patreon at patreon.com/NorseCode. Special thank you to Adam. Special thank you to Jeff Rivers for signing up, and Vinny Conway as well for signing up over on Patreon. Again, really appreciate it. And let's also go over to paypal.me/NorseCode as well. That's a one-time donation. Or you can buy the merch, including the 10-year anniversary stuff, over at norsecode.threadless.com. Things look especially good as a onesie over there, so check it out. You can also get a shower curtain, which Arif is very fond of. I've been messaging Arif. I have been, but I've also been vaguely threatening.
Also true.
Over the past couple of episodes about a gift that was going to get to Arif, and we were going to open it for this episode. It got stuck in customs, which says something about the gift, I suppose. So it got stuck in customs. The tracking said it was supposed to be there today, but it wasn't. So there will be no opening ceremony today. And then you're off to fly back to hang out with your brother for a few days. So you won't actually get it until likely you come back. And I just have to hope that it you don't open it up
Clears
and then
customs.
destroy it. Yeah, or just hope that it clears customs at all. Quite frankly.
Sounds like there's a chance it might not.
Look, you buy things off a Wish, you kind of get what you get. So
Jeez.
that's where I'm at. So
All right, I got a new gaming PC. Great.
yeah, that.
It only cost the show $200.
Well, I didn't have to pay for anything with money, so we'll see how this cursed item does. All right, let's get into the game. And I guess the first thing I want to ask is about the Vikings run game. Why on earth would they start anyone but Ty Chandler after this game?
I feel so robbed, right? Because I kept on saying, look, there's a reason the Vikings aren't playing him. There's a reason. They know. They've signaled that he's not ready to play in a number of ways. They gave him an opportunity to win the opening job. He didn't. After he essentially auditioned for that, they tried to sign Myles Gaskin, who just clearly wasn't good enough, but they still weren't comfortable with him, so they traded for Cam Akers, all the while their starting running back was healthy. So it was very clear they didn't even want him to be the third back. He's the best back. I mean, it's only been a couple of games, right? And in some of those games, we focused a little bit too much on his explosive runs and not enough on his success rate or his yards per carry or his efficiency overall. And it tended to match Madison, and so you're just like, yeah, whatever. But he's good, it seems like, based off of the small sample that we have. And so within that context, it's just like, why? After the game, Kevin O'Connell did say, hey, this guy's grown a ton as a pass protector. It's been huge. And to the extent that you kind of trust PFF ratings, his pass protection grade was pretty good. For context, the PFF gave Christian Darrisaw like an average to above average grade, which if you were watching him the whole game, I can see why somebody might disagree with that. Not just the 2 penalties, but I would say I wouldn't say he gave up 2 sacks. He was involved in the 2 sacks that were given up from the pass rusher to his side. But, I don't think that he made all of his run blocks. Always a grain of salt there. But the information that we have suggests, maybe he's actually good at pass protection. So, yeah, maybe it was like he wasn't going to be good until about now. But, man, it feels like you could have just had this dude the whole time. Because he was on the roster. Like we know that.
Yeah.
So like, what's the deal? What's going on? So yeah, I played well. Had a 50% success rate by RBs don't matter. I think somebody else had a 48% success rate. Basically, one of the higher success rates that you can get as a running back without a running quarterback in the NFL. It's actually really good. Positive expected points per play, pretty rare for a running back. Averaged a bunch of yards per carry, like 6, something like that, 5.7, something like that, which is great. Had a bunch of 8-yard runs. I got stuffed a couple of times near the end of the game, but yeah, it was good production. We saw a bunch of really good running back skills. It feels like we could have done this a little bit sooner.
I enjoyed your tweet about how he was how he was doing his best version of the Asiata. Like Asiata.
Yeah, he's the Matt Asiata of getting 8 yards on first down. he got 8 yards exactly like 4 times on first down.
It was impressive.
Crazy.
It was impressive. I enjoyed that quite a bit. But yeah, it was great. I was like, oh, okay, that's just what we're doing today. Fantastic. So the Vikings lost. Let's take a look at the first thing I want to just go over is the Vikings offense, because obviously this was something that was very much lacking in the Raiders game. They came out, scored on their first drive. Great. Cool. The passes looked a little off and wrong. Some of them were being caught, but it seemed to be a lot of kind of throwing across your body, or like poor choices being bailed out by receivers.
Yeah, there was a lot of that.
Addison in particular was helping him out.
Well, both Addison touchdowns were on ill-advised throws.
Oh my god.
Yeah, I mean the 39-yarder was gorgeous. There's probably a better rookie catch this year from like, Tank Dell or Zay Flowers or something, probably, but I can't recall it off the top of my head. So because of that, actually, it's this one. Is this phenomenal catch, because he's catching it basically fingertips almost touching the ground. It's such a low ball, and mind you, it's a low ball because Nick Mullins is throwing it as he's getting sacked, right? Like that's the reason. So it's a really low ball. Addison just picks it up, but it's not just that he like catches something that's like really low to the ground. Already a fairly difficult task for football players. I think much more difficult than a lot of people realize. That's already the case. But he's doing it on the run, and he effectively catches it in stride, and he generates yards after the catch off of that without having to slow down, which is nuts. Like, that's crazy that you could do that. Cool. So that ruled the second touchdown, the one where Mullins like rolls out, which we didn't see a ton in the first half, but he like rolls out and fits this insane window to Addison, which Addison made good on, like won the contested catch. Just like crazy stuff. I mean, all the receivers. I mean, Justin Jefferson played outstanding. I think he got 80+ yards. DJ Hawkinson played outstanding, I thought. The receivers like stepped up in a way that they just like haven't all year. Like, honestly, like of course Nick Mullins gets to play when the receivers are all having a good game, and Joshua Dobbs doesn't get to play with the good game receivers. But at the same time, like maybe there's something there. I wouldn't necessarily regard Mullins as like super accurate, but like maybe a little bit more accurate than Dobbs when it comes to at least specifically ball placement on receivers. So maybe that helps.
That touchdown for the first and goal, and he threw the touchdown to Addison across his body as he was going back. I was literally like 2 downs prior. I had tried to explain to my son, who was watching with me, about why you don't throw things across your body as a quarterback. How it's easier to get picked off, it ends up at an angle, all of that. And then Mullins does that. And he looks at me, and I'm like, look, that was a terrible decision. It worked, but that was a horrible decision. Like, I'm happy.
Never too early to teach your son about process versus outcome.
Yes, exactly. Like, yeah, you could have a bunch of, you could have a bunch of chocolate or whatever. Maybe your stomach doesn't hurt that night. Cool, great. But what if it does? Like, it, I can't believe that, like, as I was explaining why this, like, James is having an honest to God parenting moment with a kid who's really into football right now and trying to explain why you don't throw across your body as a quarterback because he's been playing Madden a lot and doesn't understand why he's getting picked off. Okay, cool, great. Here's a perfect example. Oh, he came down with it?
Then
great.
It just ruins all your lessons, man.
Oh,
Nick Mullins.
Nick Mullins is the reason why I'm a terrible father. It's obvious.
Yeah, something's got to be done about this.
He's gonna get a very
epidemic.
He's gonna get a very strongly worded letter, and I don't care if he reads it.
Florida's about to pass a "Don't Say Nick Mullins" law.
Yes, exactly. Thank you. Yeah, it's like across his body, just that one in particular bugged me. It was just one of those, like, I bet Dobbs would have just run it there. It seemed like something that he would have just tried to run for.
Right. Yeah. I mean, he would have. I found it. So to me, Nick Mullins threw 4 turnover-worthy plays. I believe PFF has him with like 2 last time I checked. So I don't know. That seems incorrect to me, but I would have to be a little bit more rigorous about outlining each one of those plays and watching the replays. The vibe was 4 turnover-worthy plays, I guess is the best way I can put it, while also being like reasonably accurate, right? But yeah, it was off. The timing was there. The decision making wasn't necessarily there. The processing was. When I say timing, I just mean when he gets the ball out. So like the processing wasn't necessarily there or on time. But yeah, he was wild, dude. Like so I think he threw the pick off his back first, and then it was that pass to Addison. If I remember the sequence of events, like when the pick occurred. But like, yeah, there's just like a lot of strange decisions, and sometimes the Vikings just bailed him out.
Well, if we can, let's talk about one of the worst interceptions I've ever seen. And this has been a year of backup quarterbacks, not just for the Vikings, but all over the league. You've seen a lot of terrible decisions involving throwing the ball away in the wrong spot to get, intentional grounding, or bad throws across your body, all that. This one like took the Madden logic or the Madden like gravity to a whole new level when he just kind of threw the ball up to try to throw it away, and it ended up just in the lap of the defender who was sacking him.
Yeah. It was as if the ball glitched through his arm and into the defender, right? Like, how could you let this happen? Who designed this game? That's crazy. Yeah, it was brutal, man. You would think that would have taught him a lesson about throwing while getting dragged down to the ground. It did not. This is not a problem unique to Nick Mullins among quarterbacks in the Vikings quarterback room. Like Joshua Dobbs will throw while he's getting taken to the ground. This seems to be like a problem. But
the
yeah,
whiteboard in that room must say, "Do not take the sack, no matter what." Like just in the biggest, boldest letters.
And the thing is, Cousins will take the sack. That's like the craziest part. Cousins will do it. And there are times when I've criticized him for taking a sack, and then people pointed out, it was probably good that he did that. And you're like, you're probably right that he did that. Especially like an end of game scenario where it's like better actually to drain the clock a little bit more because you're about to kick a field goal, like that kind of stuff, right? But like, no, they just refuse it because like sacks are quarterback plays, right? If you're like teaching your quarterbacks, like, hey, the sacks are on you. The offensive line is there to help, but the sacks are on you. And they're negatives, and you don't want negatives. Okay, I'll just throw it. That can't be a negative. It's only positives from here once the ball leaves my hand. But yeah, it's bad pick. I'm curious about whether this. So again, I said PFF says there's only 2 turnover-worthy plays from Mullins. I am curious if they don't count this one, because initially I was like, there's only 2. I counted 3 in the first half, and I thought maybe there was a 4th one in the 4th quarter or something like that. And again, I wasn't keeping a formal tally or anything, but I thought there were 3 in the first half and 1 in the second half. And I checked PFF. Nick Mullins has a 66.4 grade, which I thought was Kind of generous. But hey, did score like 24 points, right? So that's not too bad for a backup. But it's like the turnover worthy plays are the thing that bothers me. So at check, he only has 2, and I was like, okay, whatever. And I go about my day. I was like, I wonder. It probably doesn't count the ones that are like hit as thrown. I was like, that was probably it. It's probably, especially the one that was actually an interception that he got taken down to the ground. That's probably, they don't count the ones that are hit as thrown. Now I'm looking at it. He has 0 balls hit as thrown, like 0. That's the closest a quarterback can be to getting hit and throwing the ball. Like any closer, that's just a sack. That's not a hit as thrown. That's a hit as sacked, right? Like I don't know about that one, PFF.
Yeah.
But yeah, his pressure to sack ratio, by the way, 25%. I know that we've made a couple of comparisons to Keenum, especially me on Twitter when I'm talking like, especially the Addison catches were just like Keenum throwing it up to Thielen and Thielen just being like, guess the ball's mine now. But the thing about Keenum is that he had an insane pressure to sack rate that year of like 2%, right? It was like way better than anything Patrick Mahomes has done. And Patrick Mahomes is famous for having an insane pressure to sack. The second best quarterback in the PFF era might be, well, besides Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, might be Phillip Rivers, right? And so, and that year, Phillip Rivers was leading the league in pressure to sack ratio at like 9%. It was unsustainably good. And Case Keenum was just like, yeah, 2% of my pressures are sacks. Deal with it. And he's like got an 80% contested catch win rate. That's not happening with Mullins, but you see where it's coming from. Let's see, pressure to sack. Okay, well that's not that. I clicked on the wrong column. So if I look at quarterbacks with at least 20% of 245 dropbacks, so oh my God, this is a bad year for pressure to sack rate. So I said that 25% is bad. It is, by the way, it's very bad. It would be over the course of a full season, 4th worst in the NFL. So here are the names among quarterbacks with a minimum 20%. At number 1, it's Tommy DeVito, which you got to love his moxie. You can't fault him, so it's fine. Number 2 is Daniel Jones, so one must be learning from the other. Number 3 is Ryan Tannehill. Number 4 is Zach Wilson. Tied with him is Bryce Young. 6th is Bailey Zappi. 7th is Desmond Ridder. This is like, aside from Tommy DeVito, this is not an elite group of quarterbacks, right? Like this is not good company to be in.
Not a Flacco among them.
Not a Flacco among them. But Tommy DeVito's pressure to sack rate is 39%, which Daniel Jones is 31%. Like that is an insane, oh my God, 39%, then 31, then 26. And then it'd be 25 for Nick Mullins, right? So that's a crazy pressure to sack rate. So he took sacks at a pretty high rate, and he very much tried not to. He was like, oh, not this one. Not today, bud. Yes, today, but not that one. That is correct. That was a pick. That should have been 28%. That's all I got to say.
Just ridiculous. That sack bothered me for a number of reasons. I enjoyed the pick 6 that got called back on a penalty. That was nice, but that was still an ugly interception. Just, it wasn't exactly inspiring quarterback play, and we're on our 4th quarterback of the year, so we're kind of getting what we're getting at this point. A bit more on the offense. Jefferson was out there.
I do want to talk about the pick 6 that was taken away, because I did see a couple of people, just super quick, mention that like it was a free play, so he took the chance. And like I would be very sympathetic to it if he wasn't taking the chance on a screen. Like the screen is not your free play throw, right? Like
your free play is the one you throw down like 80 yards down the field. Like you're just getting it up just to see if it happens, and if it turns out to be offense, if it turns out to be pass interference, even better. But you try,
right? No, exactly.
Not on a screen.
Exactly. Yeah, it's like, okay, I know that screens are like, they're not like you're only getting 3 yards. That's like not how screens work. You could house it, you could get 10 yards, but that's not really the outcome, right? Screens are meant to avoid -2, -1, right? They're meant to get you back on schedule, move the chains, right? Yeah, You tried to throw a screen on a free play and it nearly cost you. That's actually two problems on the play. One, not seeing the free play and not just like chucking it. Which like that actually is a fairly, I'm not going to say rare among quarterbacks, but it's not super common, right? It's uncommon among quarterbacks. So I don't want to like belabor that point. But like second, like that dude saw, I forgot the name of the person who picked it. I think it might have been Dax Hill, which like Dax Hill dropped that first pick and then he got another pick. So maybe I'm just combining all the people who got picks into Dax Hill besides the defensive lineman. But yeah, that dude like read the play from moment one. He was like, oh, that's a screen. That's mine, actually. That was bad. Bad. So yeah, so just that, I just wanted to get that out of the way. It's like that one, we got to, and maybe, hey, I think I counted that as one of my turnover-worthy plays, and PFF does not count plays taken away by penalty in the turnover-worthy play docket. So that's actually another thing for us to note going forward in the future is that like, hey, the play is taken away by penalty, they don't count it. Generally a good practice. I'm going to count it here for the reason I just mentioned, which is there's no way he knew that was a free play.
Just an awful decision.
Yeah.
Well, let's talk a little bit about Jordan Addison, who had a great day, and Justin Jefferson, who stayed out there the whole time, looked good, was doing Justin Jefferson things, and Hawkinson also was catching balls, was out there moving.
Hey,
it was refreshing to see the three of them actually accomplishing positive things as opposed to just dropping everything that was heading their direction. That like last week.
How unlucky is Dobbs? Again, I'm not saying Mullins is not better. He probably is. But like Dobbs got like 2 targets to Jefferson his whole run.
Yep.
There was a game, he didn't even get to finish the game. There was a game he had 6 drops. 6. And then he had 4 out of 5 contested catch losses. And then Nick Mullins goes in and they don't drop a pass. They don't drop not one. They didn't drop one for Nick Mullins in the Raiders game. They didn't drop one in this game. I'm pretty sure they're like winning almost all of their contested catches. What? Okay, so I'm looking at the contested catch rate. They won 7 of 8 contested catches in this game. 7 of 8. And I believe they won 1 of 2 for him in the Raiders. Like, it is like crazy. Like, Dobbs doesn't get Jefferson, which we saw the impact Jefferson had in this game, right? Because the Bengals were like, all right, like we have an LSU receiver of our own. We know what the game is here. We're going to double this dude the whole game. And if we can, we're also going to double Hawkinson. And if KJ Osborne beats us, my bad. That's on us, right? Which is the right strategy, right? That's correct. And that's what they did. And it opened up a ton of space for Jordan Addison, a ton of space, and a ton of space for KJ Osborne for whatever that's worth. I'm sorry, I've kind of soured on the dude. I've been defending him for so long. I'm a little close to done. But like, just like, and I get that, like, and Luke wrote the whole thing over at Why Left last week about the nature of the drop and how quarterbacks can influence drops and how, the way that we count drops and the way that we determine who's at fault or how we grade a play based off of when, all of that. Like, I get that, right? Like the Jordan Addison sideline thing, that was a good chunk of that was Joshua Dobbs' fault. Some of that was Jordan Addison's fault. And you can split that up however you want, right? But like come on. Again, Dobbs didn't play well enough, right? Like he can't have won the job. But come on.
Nope. Dobbs is the inactive third string quarterback now. That's where we're at after all of this. And he had Jefferson for like 3 targets. And then he tried to kill him. Then he tried to kill him. Yeah. Admittedly, he tried to kill him.
Yeah, okay, yeah, again, like I don't want to like, he played a role in Jefferson literally going to the hospital. Like, it's not like, but that happens a lot, right? Where a receiver gets thrown the ball a little bit too high. Again, Jefferson was the right target on that play and the timing was fine. He just threw it too high, which that's on him, right? But that happens a lot. The fact that Jefferson went to the hospital for that one, there's a luck element involved, right? Like you can't, like he didn't shoot Justin Jefferson. You can't just be like, yeah, it's his fault. He took out a gun and shot him. No, he didn't. Right? That's also bad luck. He contributed to it.
Well, it was a Hail Mary. It was a Hail Mary at the end of the second half. Like they just don't call that sort of thing.
So like, yeah, it's just like, oh man, dude, Nick Mullins has not played a snap where a Vikings target has dropped a ball. The Vikings lead the league in drops. Like, do you get how insane that is?
None of this is okay. None of this is right.
So anyway, Mullins, like when we account for stuff like, I mean, the defensive backs are dropping the passes. I don't know it's not like he throws a super catchable ball, right? The defensive backs certainly disagree. But like Mullins has thrown a bunch of turnover-worthy type passes that haven't counted or have been dropped, right? Has thrown some wildly inaccurate throws, has thrown some insane sack interceptions, right? And so when we compare Nick Mullins to the average backup quarterback, we don't have to worry about Dobbs. We know that Dobbs is not a fantastic. That's fine. Right? But when we compare Mullins to like an average backup quarterback, we should like account for like these facts, right? That like they have won 8 of 10 contested catches, that they have not dropped a pass for him, that the defensive backs have dropped interceptions. So we can incorporate all of that and just be like, okay, well, now we know this about Mullins. When we watch him, we're kind of like, I don't know, but there's something there. And I do want to commend the fact that he is very like, when the timing is there, the timing is super there. His time to throw like went up to like 3 point whatever seconds instead of 2.7 like last week. But the timing is there. He's throwing within the rhythm of the offense. Now, if his first or second read isn't open, that's like a pretty big problem for him. It's not the 49ers, so you can't just like guarantee that Shanahan is just going to scheme somebody open. But yeah, it's, there's definitely positive quality. You can call the whole playbook, which is like, that's huge. We'll talk about the Kevin O'Connell play calling either in the mailbag or whenever you want to bring it up, James. But like, you can at least call the whole playbook as opposed to be like, hey, these are the 15 plays Joshua Dobbs has. And, that's what we're going to do. Right. So there's that.
Let's talk about the defense for a moment, because the defense has really been bailing out the Vikings a lot over the past few weeks, and they were doing fairly well in the first half. But what changed between the first and the second half?
It's not even the first and second. It's like the first 3 quarters and the fourth quarter, right? Like that's like, not that they were spectacular in the third quarter, but they were like garbage in the fourth. It was like last year. It's just like, what's interesting is I think it was Kevin Seifert, I think, posted for the first 3 quarters, the Vikings defense has allowed like 4 points a game or whatever in the first 3 quarters, which is number 1 in the NFL, and they allowed 10 points per game in the fourth quarter, which combined 14 points per game. That's pretty great. But like in the fourth quarter, it's 10 points, and that's 31st in the NFL, which I don't know who's 32nd. That's got to feel pretty bad. But just it's like 2 years ago, last year's Vikings maybe. But it might just be like, hey, part of the strength of this defense is how difficult it is to figure out. By the fourth quarter, some of these quarterbacks have figured it out. Maybe that's it. I don't know. But one potential explanation is that the Vikings are not changing their play calling in the fourth quarter, but teams are adjusting for the fact that they're playing from behind, and so they're calling. It's not even adjusting to the opposing defense. It's that they are now calling more aggressive passes that, they incorporate a particular type of receiver release, or they get rid of the ball at a certain point or whatever, right? They call certain types of passes for 2-minute drills or up-tempo type offenses that you don't see in the first 3 quarters. And maybe this defense is poorly suited to handle that. So it could be any number. It could be a combination of those factors, but that could be it. Anyway, in this game, the Vikings like 3 straight touchdown drives, a 75, if I'm remembering correctly, a 75-yard drive, a 74-yard drive, and like a 63-yard drive, like long drives. And like the Vikings defense has been put into a ton of tough positions. They lead the league in scores allowed on drives where they allowed negative yardage, right? So that's like the Vikings turn the ball over inside their own 20, and then it's like a sack, a tackle for loss, and then they gain like 4 yards. And so it's like 4th and 14 and they kick a field goal, right? So that's the defense going above and beyond and then still getting a stat marked against them in terms of the points that they've allowed. And so they've been in a spot where actually the points allowed has understated their quality of play. This is the opposite. They allowed long drives, not even like necessarily big plays. Obviously, there were some pretty big plays. It's a pretty good one from T. Higgins that we're probably going to see at the end of the year when they award the best catch of the year, right? Or probably, I think it's play of the year. I think they don't do they do best catch or they do play of the year?
I believe it's play of the year.
Okay. It's usually a catch, so, but, I don't know, but there's probably a 99-yard Derrick Henry run in there somewhere. But, we're probably going to see that. We're probably going to see like a matching LSU play of the year trophies, right? But yeah, so there are big plays, but like for the most part, the problem was that these were like methodical. They continued to gain yardage. When we had Goodberry on, like we asked, like, hey, so Jake Browning said pretty well. Is there a concern about sustainability here? And he was like, yeah, I think specifically the Vikings defense, the way that they kind of mess with quarterbacks, is not something that Browning in particular might be used to, and he's had some struggles against the blitz, at least on film, and that bore out in the statistics too. He's like one of the least blitzed quarterbacks in the NFL, so we didn't get a good sample. But the reason his numbers were so good is because he's one of the least blitzed quarterbacks in the NFL. So he had a strong rate of high percentage play where he didn't have to deal with the blitz. Now here he does, right? So yeah, I don't really know because the Vikings, they don't really change their stripes. Brian Flores doesn't really change up what the defense is, generally speaking. If it's a 2-minute drill, you're probably going to have people on the sidelines a little bit more often. You're more likely to rush 3 instead of 6 or whatever. Like there is a situational play calling, but the essence of the defense remains the same, right? Like if there's 4 minutes left and they're down 2 scores, you're probably blitzing. Like that's what the Vikings do. So I don't know what it is, right? But it is a problem.
Well, they were asked to bail out too many times, and it eventually goes away. He can't do that. So I want to ask about kind of like the last that T. Higgins play, especially like the reach out. What I want to say what happened, but how do you
saw?
Well, yeah, it was a heck of a stretch. How do you just not like realize, and this happens with the Vikings all the time, especially this year in the fourth quarter, these are just the guys that are being targeted. How do you not, I say prevent this from happening, but how do you not cover more? How do you not scheme around it drives me nuts to watch their like number 1 or number 2 just always be open for no reason.
Yeah, and at that point, Ja'Marr Chase was like out of the game, right? So like it's just T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd, right? And so you would think like, hey, maybe a little bit of extra attention to the only receiver that's probably going to win downfield. Tyler Boyd, I like him. We talked about it in the interview with Goodberry, but he's not that guy. Sorry, I watched the "You're Not That Guy" video like a couple of days ago, and it's just like in my head. Tyler Boyd is not that guy, right? T. Higgins can be. There are times when T. Higgins is that guy. Right. And so you probably got to know that. And you got to think, hey, if they rotate this way, it's our like 5'10" rookie slot corner from the 3rd round up against T. Higgins. So we should probably do something about that. And, we didn't. Right. Like they didn't, adjust. Probably do that. It is difficult if you are going to live that life and rush 6 to double a guy. Like you can't double a guy really if you're rushing 6 unless they keep more in to prevent that 6, and the Bengals weren't doing that. So how do you do that? Sometimes if you rush 3, you have got 8 in coverage. Maybe you could probably double a guy. And I think probably that would have been a better approach. Hindsight's 2020, so I don't want to be too harsh on it, but it's like there's only one guy they're throwing to in this situation. It's not Irv Smith, man. He might be Tanner Hudson. He's having a good game, but it's probably T. Higgins. And yeah, you got your rookie 5'10", 175 pound. When I was looking up like who the worst tush pusher could be besides Brandon Powell, 2 guys showed up lighter on the Vikings roster than Brandon Powell. One of them was Jordan Addison. The other one was the guy guarding T. Higgins, right? like you get it? Yeah.
Well, you brought it up. Let's talk about it. What the hell was that?
All right, so I don't want to spoil. So I just finished editing Luke Braun's piece on the Tush Push. So he's got a whole quarterback sneak piece coming up for all you degenerates that want to learn about like the wedge from 1919 wing T football, which that's of course that's what Luke Braun wrote about. But he goes down into the play, so I'm not going to spoil all of it. But from my perspective, what I wrote. The team made a series of mistakes and then they doubled down on those mistakes. A sentiment I deeply empathize with, but they are a $1 billion organization and I'm a 35-year-old failure, right? There's like a huge difference in stakes here, right? I don't understand the thought process. And he explains the thought process after the game. So just to kind of lay it out, I'm sure everybody kind of knows what happened, but just to kind of lay it out. So the Vikings hurry up to the line of scrimmage in overtime in order to advance what is essentially a 3rd and inches, right? And they see a quarterback sneak opportunity. The Bengals are not lining up appropriately. They snap the ball, they convert, right? But turns out the Bengals saw that coming and they called a timeout because they weren't lined up appropriately. Okay, the Bengals call a timeout and the Vikings don't change the person. So the timeout's already been called, right? And so no matter what, the Bengals have the right by rule, right? Because so like if you're in no huddle and you never change your personnel, you can just go. You can just snap the ball every 5 seconds between plays, right? And if they want to substitute players, they can at their own risk, right? But they won't because you could incur a 12-man on the field penalty, or you could only have 10 men on the field, and also you won't be able to set up in time, and the offense is set up in 2 ago. But even if you're rushing as fast as you can, right? And this is what like Baylor would do back in the big air days of Big 12. Is that they would cycle out receivers. So receivers would run downfield and then they just leave on the sideline and new receivers would come in from the sideline. And so they would substitute while in the middle of a no huddle offense. And it was nuts. Like Saban hated it, by the way. He was like, you got to let us substitute players. Like I can't. Well, in the NFL, you get to substitute this. Anytime a player leaves and another player enters, the ref stands over the ball. They substitute players in, right? And so if you're in a no huddle, it makes sense to be like, okay, we're in 11 personnel. I like what we're looking at. I like the way that they're lining up their defense. I know what they call in these situations. They don't have the luxury of getting the call in from the sideline. So we're just gonna destroy them. Well, the Bengals called a timeout. They have the right to substitute regardless of whether or not you stay in 11 personnel. The Vikings stayed in 11 personnel. They brought on base defense, which is kind of heavy given the modern NFL, right? They're not a nickel, right? So they've got 4 defensive linemen, they've got 4 defensive backs, and they've got 3 linebackers. Exotic, right? Just crazy exotic, right? So they're in base defense against nickel, or against 11 personnel. So that's 3 wide receivers, 1 tight end, 1 running back. And so the Vikings are at a size disadvantage already. And so, because essentially from a blocking perspective or a size or strength perspective, it's a receiver against a linebacker. And they decide that they want that. So the Vikings run a quarterback sneak. They motion Brandon Powell across the formation, and he stops behind Nick Mullins, which signals to the defense like, oh, he's going to push. That's correct. And so he snaps the ball and he pushes. And he gains yardage is maybe a strong word, but he gains territory, right? He gains a couple of feet, maybe a couple of inches, but he advances the ball. Okay, well, if he advanced the ball that much again, it's a conversion, right? It's 4th and inches. Because when it was 3rd and 1, it was really 3rd and a foot, maybe a foot and a half, right? It was less than a yard. It was maybe half yard, maybe less than half a yard. And you advance it, and now it's definitely, it's like 6 inches, 4 inches, right? So you've got the ability to advance the ball if you do the exact same thing. So the Vikings try to do the exact same thing, but here's the thing. The officials bring out the sticks to measure. Guess what that allows the Bengals to do? They substitute their players again. And this time, instead of putting out Myles Murphy and Joseph Osai, they put out Trey Hendrickson and Sam Hubbard, right? They put out their like good defensive ends, right? And they very briefly considered, so Josh Tupou goes onto the field. He's substituted for Akeem Davis-Gaither. They actually changed their mind. Instead of having 5 defensive linemen, they put Akeem Davis-Gaither, the linebacker, back in. So it's still a 4-3 look, right? Both A-gaps are covered up. And the Vikings rush up the A-gap, and they get stoned. There's nothing they can do. They actually, I think, lose a little bit of yardage. Doesn't matter. Bengals ball. So that's what happens, right? So the Vikings. So after the game, people are like, "Hey, Brandon Powell's 181 pounds. Why him? Why was that him?" And O'Connell's response is, "Well, we didn't want to give them the ability to substitute into a heavy goal line package, and so we stayed in the package that we were in." But like the problem is he's out leveraged at that point already, just based on the personnel. Again, effectively, you're asking Brandon Powell to block a linebacker. Logan Wilson's 241 pounds. Brandon Powell's 181 pounds. That is 60 pounds you're giving up. And it's not as if Nick Mullins benches 600 or squats 600, right? Luke makes a point that actually, we kind of overemphasize that. That's fine. You can read the article when that goes live. But if we're talking about personnel and advantages, the Vikings are essentially -1. So given that, you essentially have 2 timeouts called, one called by the Bengals, one essentially called because the refs measure. You have the opportunity to consider, hey, we should call this differently because there's ways they could do that, or we got to put better personnel out in the field. You're not going to trick them out of it. And it turns out they agreed, and Zach Carter, Bengals defensive lineman, times the snap and jumps it. They didn't hard count, which it's so clear. And again, hindsight, right? But it's so clear that Zach Carter is jumping the snap. So they have figured something out about the way that the Vikings quarterback sneak. And they didn't hard count. They didn't extend or change the motion in any way, so it looks the exact same. And Zach Carter disrupts the snap by jumping into Garrett Bradbury. And Nick Mullins is now occupied with making sure that he holds onto the ball as opposed to advancing the ball, right? And that's you're in a bad situation. O'Connell. So after they said hey, so did you consider another play on 4th down? O'Connell said, when you've got 4 or 5 inches to go, I don't want the quarterback to turn his back or something. I don't want to turn my back to run the ball or something like that. And I don't understand that. Intuitively that feels like it makes sense, but it actually, when you think about it, it doesn't make sense at all. They're jumping the snap. They know what's happening. You gotta change. You should probably talk. Here's the deal. Sorry, I keep interrupting myself. Here's the deal. If you take a look at the 3rd down, not even the 4th down, the 3rd down replay, right? You see Jordan Addison is not covered by anyone. He's just wide. 3rd and inches, you've got a receiver completely uncovered. Nothing, right? What? Completely uncovered. He needs to fall forward. And I get that he's the lightest person on the roster. We literally just discussed that. But he just has to fall forward. It doesn't matter. He's fine. He has to give himself up. Now he's a defenseless player. He's protected. Just catch the ball and fall forward. You haven't dropped a ball all game. I just went on a rant about that. You're fine. No, the way their defense is set up, they've got a guy on the other side, on the Justin Jefferson side, not the Jordan Addison side, on the Justin Jefferson side, on the right side of the line, that is covering no one. He's just an overhang defender. There is no one there, right? In theory, I guess if Hawkinson splits out, he's probably covering Hawkinson. But in reality, he's covering no one. And just nothing. And they see this look. And on 4th down, they don't do anything about it. Nothing. They don't hey, Jordan Addison was uncovered on the last play. Could we quick game that? What if Brandon Powell motions, but what if he just keeps motioning and then you snap and you throw it really quickly to Jordan Addison? What if you did that? Because again, you have time. You're not running no huddle. You're not running up tempo. They brought out the sticks. The Bengals substituted players. This is not I can't. This is so frustrating because it's the Vikings are typically, I'm not going to say fairly good at this, but they don't screw it up this catastrophically. I don't understand the degree to which they screwed this up because it feels like they don't do that often, right? like under the O'Connell, which like I know what the reputation of the Vikings are, that they screw things up all the time, but usually they screw things up because the universe hates them, not because they make their own mistakes like this, right? Like
this isn't Jacksonville on Sunday night, where everything was just they're just tripping over themselves.
Yeah, it's like you like there's a receiver uncovered, and all you have to he has to take one step and he converts. Literally once. He could shuffle step and he converts, right? Like come on, man. Anyway, there's more on that. We are focusing a lot on 2 plays. Those 2 plays occurred in overtime, so they're very high leverage plays. Obviously, if the Vikings had played a little bit better on some other element, if Nick Mullins doesn't throw this pick or that pick, if he just like takes a sack instead, if they push T. Higgins out instead of on the corner touchdown, not the one where he just like extends the ball. If they push T. Higgins out, whatever, right? There's like a bunch of times where they could have won the game. They just made us stop on defense in the fourth. Like all of these matter exactly as much, if not more, than the failed sneak, right? But it's easy to talk about the sneak because it's very high profile. It occurred at the end of the game, and it's very obvious like what the Vikings win condition is if they get that, right? So it feels, but it's like representative of like the frustrations that Vikings fans have. So it's another reason to talk about it. It was not the most important play of the game, and the amount of time I've spent talking about it, the amount of time that people have written about it and stuff like that, maybe probably not commensurate to its importance, but it provides a kind of a window into, hey, they were pretty good in 2 minute last year. They're not good this year. And, maybe stubbornness or panic or the commitment to an idea instead of a commitment to the process that led to the idea might be at play.
It's frustrating. The life of the Vikings fan is typically frustrating. And watching this happen repeatedly did not help. It seemed to be a microcosm of everything going wrong. But
yeah,
we have. But lucky for all of you, we have plenty more in the mailbag, which is where we're going to go right now, because we've got a number of questions on this game specifically, and a bit about the push as well. But let's go to Nick Howard, who asks, can someone explain why Kevin O'Connell chose to A, not take a timeout before 4th down, and why he chose to run it again with a center and a quarterback who both have spent time on IR for back problems?
I wouldn't focus like that much on the back problems thing. It's just kind of funny. He doesn't have to take that timeout because, again, the Vikings benefit from the fact that they have to measure, right? That's effectively a timeout. Now, if you call a timeout, they're not going to call like an unsportsmanlike or delay of game or whatever it is when you call 2 timeouts in a row. You could call that timeout, you're fine. But they didn't actually have to call that timeout. They had time because they were measuring. So yeah, I don't know, but there's a lot of ways to run a QB sneak. There's a lot of ways to run that quarterback sneak against that look, right? And be successful. And the Vikings chose not to do it. So I don't know why he did that, but I can explain why it was bad that he did that. So I hope that helps.
Reclining Buddha asks, in a pie chart of blame for the Bengals loss, what percentages do you assign for the play calling of Kevin O'Connell, the play calling as far as the quarterback sneaks, the Mullins interceptions, defensive collapse in the 4th quarter, Jake Browning's vendetta? Feel free to add or remove categories as needed.
I guess the defensive collapse in the 4th quarter is probably the biggest one. That's the hugest concern because you have a multiple score lead at that point. Without the collapse, you're fine. The interceptions, obviously, if you don't throw those interceptions, the Vikings are in a much better place. They probably win the game. It went to overtime, right? And interceptions probably a big difference there. The play calling, the sneaks, yeah, it sucks. We just talked about it, but it's probably the least important about this group. Except I don't actually think play calling for Kevin O'Connell in general was bad. I have yet to see a compelling explanation for why the play calling overall was bad. I mean, they scored 17 points in the second half, right? Like it wasn't like you score 17 points a half. You're leading the league in points, right? You get 34 points a game. That's great. So I don't really know what the concerns or issues that people had with this play calling. I had some issues with some specific plays, like I wouldn't have thrown a screen here. I wouldn't have had these receivers run these routes here. But just generally speaking, I thought the play calling was fine. So maybe that's at the bottom of the list. Jake Browning's vendetta is probably number 2 behind the fourth quarter collapse, and they're related. And then the interceptions and the sneaks. It's probably on my list. And then the general play calling, because I don't think that was a huge problem. But yeah, I'm sure most people know about the story now with Jake Browning. He was like, apparently all week, he was like, no, that's not any different than any other game. You just got to win your games. And then after the game, he was like, yeah, this one was special. As soon as I saw that logo, I was like, hey, it's on. You shouldn't have cut me. Says after the game that he turned to a camera and yelled, they shouldn't have cut me or something like that.
About that. Like, you couldn't beat out Sean Mannion twice.
I think that's a Vikings problem. I think he was right. I think he did beat out Sean Mannion twice. And I think the Vikings were like, oh, we just want a veteran. I don't know that this is not Kyle Sloter type of deal. I think Jake Browning's right. Well, because I remember watching that camp and being like, hey, I probably should keep Jake Browning, but they won't because they've got Kellen Mond and they only want one rookie, right? But like he beat out Kellen Mond. Like, okay, so Ben Gessling had already tweeted out. I shouldn't say had already tweeted out. Has recently tweeted out after the Jake Browning thing went live that the Vikings actually thought that Browning performed better. And there were a number of people. Actually, I shouldn't say that. I don't think he tweeted out that the Vikings thought he performed better. One can infer that he performed better than Kellen Mond, something that I believe happened, because a number of Vikings in the front office wanted to keep Browning above Mond, but Mond was a rookie third-round pick. He was the first third-round pick that they had. They had multiple third-round picks that year. He's a rookie third-round pick. They were not going to keep him over an undrafted free agent. They were always going to keep a veteran, so Sean Mannion makes the roster. So I don't think he didn't beat out both of them. I think he did. I think the Vikings put him into a situation where he couldn't win a job. And that's why he's ticked off, because he was right. He should have won that job. Yeah. So yeah, he said it was that was particularly special. He acknowledged that, this is not the same coaching staff or front office. That caused a whole stir that like, hey, those aren't actually the guys who cares, nerd, shut up. Technically, just Rick Spielman cut you. Like, that's the organization that fired me. I'm mad.
Yeah,
you get to be mad about that.
We can be irrationally upset any opportunity that like something good happens to the Saints. There's nobody on that Saints team that had anything to do with any of our heartbreak, but we still hate. We still don't like them. Like you're reading too much into it.
It's fine. Yeah, exactly. And the fact that he was open about it, he was like, "There's a bunch of great guys over there. They're not the same decision makers that cut me, but like F them." Like, yeah, I totally, dude. Like, I'm glad that this dude was like, hey, I love all those guys and I hate them. Like I love that. That's great. That's good energy, man. Yeah, like if we think of teams as like this entity that has a continuous history, right? If we talk about the Vikings, and when we say the term the Vikings, you can like the Everson Griffin or Jared Allen comes to mind, or Fran Tarkenton, right? Like that's the same concept as they fired me, right? Like if like you like there's a ton of situations where like a bunch of people are like they're working under a bad manager, that manager ends up firing them, and if that manager is gone and that company contacts them again, they're gonna be like, no, you're the company that hired that manager. Like how can I be assured that the company culture is any better? I was miserable when I was there, and then you fired me, and then I had to look for insurance for like my wife and kids for the next couple of months, and I couldn't, so I had to pay Cobra through the nose, right? Like I don't want to do that again. You fired me, and that's not universal for everybody, but it's understandable, right? And this is the same. I don't see why that's any different. Good for you, dude. You were right. And you got to rub the Vikings' nose in it. And then they asked him, like, hey, why did you lie to us? It wasn't even like I'm upset that you lied to me. It was just like, I'm really curious, like, why you said it was not different than any other game, and now you're kind of changing your mind, or you're saying actually that that's not the case. And he's like, oh, I would have looked really stupid if we had lost. Which is like
a self-awareness.
I like this dude. Yeah, I like this dude. He's like, what if I said that all week and then we lost? That looks dumb.
Yeah, there's an awareness there that's beyond his years as a starting quarterback. Let's go to Cody, who asks, for a Reese volatility corner, in the past you've said you want backup quarterbacks to be volatile. During the Bengals game, Nick Mullins threw 2 touchdown passes to Jordan Addison that were highly questionable. Are those throws examples of volatility, or were they too dangerous?
They are examples of volatility, and they are too dangerous. There's like a couple of dials that we're turning at once. It's like the thing. Are those throws bad and not what I meant? Yes. Are they volatile? Yeah, 100%. So there's a couple of things. So in that piece where I talked about how the Vikings should value volatility, and in the follow-up piece where I said, hey, actually, they should probably start Nick Mullins despite this volatility thing, I said a couple of things. One is that you should actually decrease your appetite for volatility if you've got a really good defense, which the Vikings do. Obviously, they didn't play a huge role in this game, but just generally speaking, from a process perspective, if you've got a really good defense, you decrease the value of the volatility. It's still good if you're an underdog to be volatile, but that's something to keep in mind. 2, it changes the equation when you reduce, like the volatility model assumes the same number of average points, right? So if you're a team that scores 17 points on average, right, and you can choose between being consistent in scoring 17 points or being volatile and scoring somewhere between 12 and 22 points. Then you choose the volatile one if you're the underdog. But that assumes the same median outcome or the same average outcome. If you decrease that, right, if you reduce your average, that typically hurts you more than helps you. And I modeled that out in a bunch of different ways with a high risk, high reward quarterback as a stand-in for that kind of play style. And it's generally not that good. Like, it's still better than being extremely consistent, but it's still not that good, especially if you've got a good defense. So, yeah, that's more volatile. Obviously, it resulted in 2 touchdowns. It also resulted in a drop pick and a pick. Analytically speaking, not worth it. Picks hurt you more than touchdowns help. But yeah, that's volatile and it's dangerous, and it was too dangerous.
Let's go to our next question, which is from Luke Braun from Ohio. A fantastic name.
So good.
From Luke Braun from Ohio, for a Reef's blitz package, can you explain Flores' tendency to drop 7 into coverage on crucial downs?
So I don't think he does that often. I mean, he still does that. Everybody drops 7 into coverage on crucial downs. But for Flores, obviously it happens a lot less often. He tends to drop 8 a lot and rush 3, and the Vikings seem to be the best drop 8 team in the league right now, so it doesn't really bother me. There was like a crucial moment in the fourth quarter where they did that. You gotta mix up your defense sometimes. So I don't really have a huge issue with that. I have not noticed that tendency. If someone can come at me with some specific numbers about how often they rush 4 in high leverage situations, I'd love to look at that data, but I don't have that in front of me. And based off of what I was watching, it's not that common. It's just like more common than in the first 3 quarters, but still really uncommon compared to the rest of the league. So it doesn't really strike me as something worthy of that much scrutiny.
Next question is going to be from Scott, who asks, not trying to be too irrational, but should Kevin O'Connell be calling the offensive plays? He seems like he designs plays well and schemes open with wide receivers, but his red zone and situational play calling has been suspect. Calling a pass play on 1st and goal at the 1, his quarterback just threw 2 bad interceptions, that sort of thing.
This one I don't really get. So really quickly, in 2022, the Vikings were 8th in the NFL in red zone touchdown rate, and they were 12th in the NFL in third down percentage, right? So, obviously these are abstract. You can adjust for, EPA on third down or EPA in the red zone to take into account all the context, like how far you have to go on third down, how far you have to go in the red zone to score. Those are all different. But just off the dome, seems like it wasn't an issue last year. Is it an issue this year? I don't know. One of the things that I really liked about him last year was that he was really, really good at the goal line, specifically really good at the goal line at finding ways to get players open. Like, it was like they were pretty good at the 2-point conversion too because of that. Like they had a bunch of 2-point plays. Sometimes they would use a 2-point play in those scenarios. I'm looking at the red zone percentage. They're 27th in red zone percentage right now, so it's like the exact opposite. But they're still 15th in third down rate. First of all, I think one of the reasons they're really low in red zone touchdown percentage this year is because for most of the year they were bad at running the ball. So you would want them to throw it. Second, like given like Ty Chandler's been having a really good day, right? Particularly on 1st and 10. Given the fact that he had a 50% success rate, which is really good in general, but really bad at the goal line, right? Because your typical success rate on a non-quarterback run without the quarterback as a running option, about 63% or something like that. That's a good deal better than 50, which is what Chandler was doing that day. A quarterback sneak is like 85, 88% without the push. That has gone down since 2019 when I looked at those numbers, but with the push, it's gone back up. But if you take the Eagles out of the equation, it goes back down. Like it's, whatever it is, the quarterback sneak, regardless of the data set that you use, is better than 50%. Not that Ty Chandler could effectively run in short yardage in that game anyway, so it might have been lower than 50%. He's really killing it on 1st down, mostly is what was happening. So I don't know that running the ball in the red zone would have been any better for the Vikings, despite the fact that Chandler was having a great day, because he was having a great day against particular defensive looks. You're not getting that. And a lot of that's going to have to rely on individually his power, unless you're tossing it to the outside on a run, in which case that's not like that different from a pass. So I don't think that was an issue. Generally speaking, situational play calling has been fine to me. I don't know. I don't think that he should be retired necessarily from calling plays. I think one of the things that you have to be more concerned about is that receivers are not executing, specifically wide receivers, are not executing on the plays that are called, which makes it a problem for someone like Nick Mullins, who's going to have to rely on the predictability of the receiver core in order for him to be effective at all.
So the next question is from Ziggy Dilf, who asks, between Mullins, Dobbs, and Hall, do the Vikings currently have the highest variance quarterback room ever, despite Jameis playing for a different team? Also, was that the single dumbest interception in NFL history? You know the one.
I don't know the one you're talking about. The one I'm thinking of is Joe Webb against the Packers, where he just kind of chucks it up, I think, with his other hand, and the Packers intercept it. Teddy Bridgewater did something very similar with the left hand in a different game against somebody else, but the one I remember is Joe Webb. So,
do you remember the Carson Wentz pick at the end of the year when he was a Colt?
Oh, it was like a pick six from like the opponent's 2 or something like that.
It was so atrociously bad.
It was bad.
Like, it didn't pop out of his hands because he was being sacked and was just trying to throw the ball away and it rolled into the guy's stomach. It wasn't that, but it was still like hilariously bad.
Yeah. I mean, like the final 4 weeks of Carson Wentz in Indianapolis overturned what was essentially 13 weeks of, and I hate to admit it, all right play. It was okay. And then those 4 weeks were so catastrophic that they were like, all right, not only do we got to fire Carson Wentz, we got to get rid of this Frank Reich guy. It was just like, oh my God, that's bad. Like, Matthew Stafford was also having a pretty bad end to his regular season, and then he followed it up by winning the Super Bowl that same year. And it was like, yeah, this is not that. This is 100% not that. Get this dude out of here.
And then they fleeced Washington when they were going to release him. When they were going to release him regardless. What a wonderful series of idiotic things. So the question being is that do the Vikings, between Mullins, Dobbs, and Hall, do the Vikings have the highest variance quarterback room ever, despite Jameis playing for another team?
So I looked into the Bills to see if because obviously at one point they employed Nathan Peterman, and Josh Allen is a very high variance quarterback. It just tends to be also like good at the same time, which is pretty nice to have in a high variance guy. And Kyle Allen, he's no Brandon Allen. Right? Like if we were going to have a room of Allen's at quarterback, Brandon Allen would be much more high variance, but Kyle Allen is reasonably high variance. I'd maybe put them on that list. Let's see, what other quarterback rooms can I look at?
I mean, I was thinking about the Steelers with Trubisky and the 2 other people who can't seem to beat him out for a job.
So we're not counting Kenny Pickett because he's injured or something?
Oh, I suppose he's injured. Yeah, that's I'm confident him injured while sedated for surgery is still better than Trubisky.
Yeah, and also regardless, he's a lower variance. He's bad, but he's a lower variance quarterback. So it kind of depends on what we're counting. But Mason Rudolph is the other guy, and he's not super high risk. He's just not high reward. So we got Joe Flacco and Dorian Thompson-Robinson. That's pretty good. We've got Lamar Jackson, Tyler Huntley, Josh Johnson, and Malik Cunningham with the Ravens. That might win. That's a crazy quarterback room. The only way to make it crazier if it's actually Trace McSorley instead, but that's a crazy one. The Jets have Zach Wilson, Trevor Siemian, and Brett Rippon. That one's pretty good. I mean, the Texans do have the OG with Case Keenum, but they also have Davis Mills. Let's see, Gardner Minshew, Sam Ehlinger, no. Trevor Lawrence, CJ Beathard, no. Will Levis, Ryan Tannehill, Malik Willis is pretty high variance. I might be more high variance than the Vikings, maybe not. I think I have to give it to the Ravens. And again, Jackson's a good high variance guy, so it's not really the same thing. But yeah, otherwise you've got Tyrod Taylor's a low variance guy. Because I was about to say Tommy DeVito and Tyrod Taylor, but that's actually not fair. Jacoby Brissett's a low variance guy, so you can't include Sam Howell.
I don't know.
Oh, I mean the Bears. The Bears win. Tyson Bagent, Justin Fields, Nathan Peterman. That's it. That wins.
Peterman being in there is a good sneaky addition to that.
Yeah, that one wins.
I was about to bring up your the winners of tonight's Monday Night Football game, the Seattle Seahawks, one of your favorites. Their room is full of scrappy people, but not the variance isn't really there.
I mean, it's higher than average, but it's not one where I'd be like, them or Nathan Peterman, right? For context, aside from Drew Lock, who played tonight, and Geno Smith, who's been playing most of the year, he just got off of injury. They've got Sean Mannion as well. But that's just not nearly the same as Nathan Peterman, Justin Fields, and Tyson Bagent.
Yeah, that's
not the same.
That's a hell of a car ride right there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Paul asks, there's a lot of talk about regular fans not being able to complete a simple 5 to 10 yard pass in the NFL. They can't. But could a fan throw a more impressive interception than Mullins threw to the defensive lineman? Or did Mullins achieve the worst of what is humanly possible? That's an excellent question. And a show title.
I love how that's worded. That's good. That's good. No, I don't think a fan could do that. I think it takes a lot of strength to throw while getting sacked. A lot of strength, a lot of tolerance for pain, and a lot of I don't want to say calm under pressure because it's very clearly a panic move, but you got to have an idea of what's going on. And a lot of people thrown into that situation would not. I think you go to the ground and then your bones evaporate.
Yeah.
I think that's what happens.
Yeah, you have that frozen in time moment with the meme of, you're probably wondering how I got to this place.
Right, yeah, exactly.
That's what you have to look forward to. Noah asks, this question is specifically for Arif. As someone who was on the Vikings beat, how would you balance the passion and emotion you had as a Vikings fan after a tough loss due to poor decision making with the questions you would want to ask the head coach after the game?
That one's not particularly tough. I would whenever I got upset at a Vikings loss as a fan, the reason I do this is because I would ask why. Right? I was always like, why did they lose, man? That sucks. I can't believe they lost. What's the reason? Is it because Christian Potter's a bad quarterback? No, that can't be it. It must be Michael Jenkins' fault. Right? I would have to think about what's going on. And that thought process is why I would ask coaches after the game what I asked them. And people have been really kind in their feedback to me when they hear questions that I ask in pressers. People have generally told me that I'm asking pretty good questions, so it seems like I'm on the right track. And yeah, it's the questions that when I was a fan, I would want to know the answers to. Why did you play without very much urgency down 3 scores? Why did you choose this particular type of play selection? Why did you call these timeouts when you did? These feel like the questions that I would have wanted to know, so they become part of my game story. There is another element to asking questions, which is that I do have to ask. Somebody has to ask questions that are perfunctory. What are the injury updates here? What was going through your mind? How do you feel? How confident are you? Those need to be asked. They provide good quotes, provide flavor and color to a story. And And then there's also questions that I have to ask that are not inherently interesting, but are important to the way that I'm writing the story. So they do, like, my mind does go into other places because it's not always what are the immediate questions I want to answer, but what are the questions that I need for the story that I'm writing? What's the context that I need here? Or what is the kind of the, this is a pivot point. We need a quote about it. Even if the quote's probably going to be boilerplate, maybe it's not, but it's a really good place because we're going to be talking about the team in this way and they have a right to respond or whatever, right? So there's a bunch of other stuff that I have to go into it with. But fundamentally, some of the questions that that have produced some of the best answers I've seen are questions I would have wanted to know the answer to when I was a fan. So it's not that different because the way that I processed a loss was like, hey, man, what is going on? I need to know.
Let's go to the next question, which comes from Ingram's left arm. Says, is there any evidence that these rush 4 plays are part of the Donatel scheme that are like a welcome gift Flores received when he onboarded?
The rush 4 plays are like okay, they're fine. They just didn't work this time. I remember when people were getting upset at Leslie Frazier for constantly calling cover 2, especially in 2-minute situations. And he was a Tampa 2 guy, so it was like pretty natural to assume that that's what he was doing. But when you broke it down, he actually wasn't doing it that often. People just assumed he was because they saw someone throw against a deep safety. And it's like the problem isn't that he called cover 2 because he didn't. He called cover 1 or cover 3. Or he had a single high safety look here. The problem isn't that he did that. The problem is that the safety was Madu Williams. Like that's not a play calling problem. That's a you have Madu Williams problem, right? And like, if he wasn't throwing to Madu Williams, he's throwing to Jamarcus Sanford. Like, what do you want him to do? So sometimes there's like a perception, like you see a couple of plays where they rush 4 and you're like, oh man, I can't believe they're doing that. And maybe I'm wrong because I didn't break down the numbers of those final couple of drives, but it really felt like they did mix the number of players that they were rushing up. And so I don't think that was like a particular problem. It just, it's noticeable, right? But like, the Vikings do it like on 30% of plays. It's like they do it the least in the league by a substantial margin. Rushing 4 is the changeup, and you do want some changeups in there.
Also, from Ingram's left arm, what would Case Cookus' touchdown to interception ratio be in this offense? And should Kevin O'Connell give him a look so long as we're throwing everything against the wall to see if it sticks?
It's probably 17-2. I say 2 because obviously some receivers would drop passes and those passes would end up in the hands of defensive backs. Certainly not Case Cookus' fault, but something like that. But I assume that Kirk Cousins would play ahead of him, just contract things, politics, you understand. But Case Cookus would have played the last 6-7 games. Famously healthy, never been injured Case Cookus,
except for the championship game of the USFL.
Oh, it's except for a lot of stuff. Yeah. He got injured what was supposed to be his final year at Northern Arizona. Got another year because of it, I think. And he's been injured basically most of his career. Like if he hadn't been injured in his final year at NAU, he would have made a practice squad somewhere, or at least he would have been signed to a team for training camp with the intention that he'd likely make a practice. He was like a priority free agent for a lot of people if it wasn't for the injuries. And then I believe he gets injured. So obviously he got injured right before the championship game or during the championship game in the USFL. But also I believe he got injured once more in a spring league context. So he gets injured a lot, but not here, not now. He throws 17 touchdowns and 2 picks over those 6 games.
Case Cookus Case Cookus would have been absolutely terrifying in this offense. It's a darn shame. Chris asks, we're going to start getting off the rails here. Chris asks, would you be one of the 5,000 fans at a 75,000 seat stadium when tickets ranged from $5 to 50 cents? And if you got there and there were wide open seats closer to the field after the game started, would you have moved down? Now, what you're not counting on here is what the weather was like during that.
Yeah. It was raining. It was raining hard. It very much depends on why the tickets are $5 to 50 cents, right? Like if it's that way because the teams are terrible, 100%, I'd be up there. I'd try to get as close as I can. Generally speaking,
I watched Timberwolves games like that in college when they were atrocious,
right, yeah.
And the tickets when parking at First Ave was more expensive than the ticket to the game.
Yeah. Like that's an experience, man. I have fun. I've been to a lot of bad Vikings games. It's fine. So I would go, but if it's there because it's like rain, no, I'm not doing that. That's I'm good. I'll watch from home. The whole point is that the experience is good, right? So yeah, it very much depends on why the tickets are that cheap. If they're that cheap because it's a USFL game, I'm game. Let's go, right? But if they're that cheap because it's like a monsoon, I'm fine. I could watch the game on TV.
I would consider moving up, but only where there's an overhang. Like you can tell where it's raining and where it's not. That would be where I would like on the lower level just be hanging out. I'm sure at some point security was just told let people into the lower level. It needs to not look like this on TV.
Yeah, exactly. Like I'm sure it would have just been fine if you just been like, all right, I'm just moving down.
Yeah. Zach Dixon asks over under on the Vikings winning a Super Bowl by episode 1000. So it took us 10 years to get to 500. So this would be another 10 years. If we're still doing this in 10 years, we owe somebody money. Like that's like obligation can only go so far.
Yeah. That's bad for everybody, especially the listeners. I would think if you all have 20 years of lore on us, I am so lost. I'm done.
It doesn't go well. But
as soon as okay, now that I'm going to say this is going to happen, but in a world where I didn't say this, the barometer would be if we don't have a category, or if we end up with a category on Archive of Our Own. If you all start writing fan fiction about us, that's it. Now that I've said that, you're going to do it, so it doesn't count. It's no longer an unmitigated experiment. But that would have been the bar. Like, and that I could see that happening at like the 15-year mark. And it's like, all right, you've written fan fiction about me. Peace.
I can see that happening tomorrow using ChatGPT.
Okay, well, if we include it, that's already happened.
Yeah,
with ChatGPT.
Yeah, I suppose.
Yeah, but otherwise,
I'm uncomfy again. that's a repressed memory. Super Bowl from the Vikings in the next 10 years. It would be nice.
So what are the odds, right? Because it's just they're not asking like. Let me look at the question.
It's over
under, right? Yeah, well, that's basically odds, right? Because you would just set the over under at 0.5 and then set whatever the money line is on that. I would say the Vikings' odds of winning the Super Bowl. Hold on, let me game out the odds for a random team winning the Super Bowl over the course of a 10-year period. I might as well, right, and just set it against that.
Oh yeah, if we're gonna take silly questions serious, we have to. Like this is the whole point of 500 episodes. You know, there's no wildly inaccurate prognostication here except for this. So we're getting back to our Norse code roots.
All right, so a random team. I think I did this right. I probably should have just done it to a power. That's probably better. Let me do that. I've got a fairly decent calculator in front of me. It's a computer. Okay, I did it correctly. Go me. So if a random team winning a Super Bowl, the odds of that over 10 years is about 30%, 27% or so, right? So I would say the Vikings odds are a little bit better than that. And so I'd say the odds are probably 40% because I do think Kevin O'Connell's a good coach. I do think that they have done a reasonably good job at acquiring talent. That's not going to matter 10 years from now, but that is going to matter next year and the year after, right? Obviously, it depends on how the quarterback situation shakes out and all that. But I think the Vikings are in an above average situation. So if the average is 30%, I think that the Vikings are probably at 40% over the course of the next 10 years. I would not say above 50, though. That seems too generous.
Yeah, just a bit. Tommy Gunn. We've been answering Tommy Gunn questions for a very, very long time.
Oh, yeah.
Tommy Gunn asks, what are your top 5 reasons for starting Norse Code all those 499 episodes ago? Wrong answers only, please. To meet women, because I think, I don't know if you were in a relationship, but I was.
2011?
No.
Yeah, a different person.
2013. But
not
yes.
2011.
Yeah, 2013.
Was I? Yeah, yes, but not with the person I was with for most of the runtime.
No. So I'm going to also go money. Money was definitely a reason why we started Norse Code.
Huge. Yeah, money is huge, yeah.
Boy, every time.
Yeah. I'd say, actually, in a sense, fame actually is kind of a reason that we started, so I can't use that one.
Power. It's not fame.
Power.
It's
right.
power.
So, meeting women, making money. I'd say
free tickets to games.
Free tickets to games. Extolling the virtues of Christian Ponder, I think.
More people needed to be aware of his greatness. Another reason,
when Dusty approached me at that wedding, he's like, "Arif, I know how much you love Christian Ponder."
Yeah,
it's important that you get the word out.
I suppose another reason why we would have started it would have had to do with the ability to meet, find, and eventually eliminate Luke Braun.
Yeah, that's one. That's actually so. Dusty didn't bring that up in the first meeting, but when we roped you in, you were like, "Well, we're going to eliminate Luke Braun, right?"
Yes.
Like, oh yeah, of course.
Yeah,
it's kind of unspoken. But
I've long since been referred to as a Terminator for reasons, and this is actually why I'm from the future. So cool. Kenneth Allen asks, for Arif's, I can't guarantee that anyone in the world will be alive in the future corner. Given that you don't know how long this podcast will be around, what do you want to get off your chest now in celebration of the 500 episode mark?
Does it seem like I keep a lot of secrets from you all?
Not this year. No, this year it was all about how your car got stolen twice, once by the cops and once by someone not officially with the cops.
We recorded a phone call I had with the cops and published it, right? Like, there's not a lot I have to get off my chest. There's also there's just stuff where I'm just like, hey, here's how the industry kind of works. And after I say it, I'm like, should I tell James not to publish that part? And at that point, I'm just like, that's too much work. I am not going to write that full sentence and send it in the group chat. That's way too much
work. That's too much, man. That's too much. I'm just going to take it on the chin.
Yeah, there's like a lot of stuff where I'm just like, I probably shouldn't explain my writing process here, or I probably shouldn't give up the kayfabe, right? Like, it was, like this year, like a couple episodes ago, I forget what I said, but it was like, I think I said something like, my takes are not always 100% honest or something like that, in reference to the Minnesota Football Party and something that Sam had set up, where I talked about hyperbole a little bit. And it didn't seem like anybody was upset by that, because it's like when I'm in serious mode, I tell people the thing that I think. But when I'm in kind of we're having a fun debate, Sam is setting up something in order for us to have something entertaining to talk about. We're very clear that we're not 100% defending the thing. No one seemed upset about it, but a couple of people tweeted I can't believe you'd betray me like that. Again, not seriously. And that was one where I was just like, I don't know if I want to pull back the curtain that much, but we published it anyway, and it was fine. So I just don't feel. I've talked about losing Vikings fandom as a person who covers the team. There's not a bunch that I've not talked about in terms of the way my experience with the industry has gone, my experience covering the Vikings has gone. And the stuff that I haven't told you, I'm probably never telling you. So this is a lot. I've put a lot out there. James has talked so much about his personal life. It's shocking. It's truly shocking.
I was in a Discord. Well, Luke was on Discord in the Locked On.
How
thing.
Unfortunate.
Well, he was on his own. He was on his little area, the Locked On Discord. He was on there.
Even more unfortunate.
And he had said there was some discussion about me, my history, or whatever. And Luke had said, "Have you ever had a conversation with James?" It's exactly like it is on the podcast, where he's going to say 2 or 3 things, and then he's going to tease something you should know, but then you have to write down to ask about later. It turns into that.
Exactly what happened when we all hung out in Minneapolis. I forget the name
August.
of the bar.
it was a Dubliner. Yeah, it was a Dubliner.
Yeah. So yeah, in August we all hung out, and James is just like saying, like, he's just telling a story, and to get to the conclusion of the story, right? To get to the punchline of the story, like he has to skate by so much stuff, and I was like, I'm like, I've 95% filled in. I was good enough. Like there was like one thing where I was like, I don't know what that's a reference to, but I'm good. And Luke was spinning, like
still funny.
his eyes rolled into the back of his head, like he was like searching his own memory banks to see if like his brain was like, there's no way that's a sentence. And then James moved on to the next sentence. And Luke was like, okay, I have not processed the previous. You can't introduce the new thing. Foot fetish model? Wait, where did that come from? Like, just like losing it, right? And it was exactly like the podcast. Like James just tells stories about his life, and we're all like, yeah, man, we're okay with that. Yeah, you went on a date with a foot fetish model. Like, you know, and you ruined it because you couldn't stop asking about it, because who wouldn't ask about that?
Because you get hyperfixated on the one thing that nobody wants to talk about.
Like, you go on a date with someone and they reveal one interesting thing about themselves. What are you supposed to do? Ignore it? Like, I get it. But like, yeah, James has revealed so much. Like, I don't know that there's much that I could get off my chest at this point. 500 episodes of me talking about like all the bad things that have happened to me. I guess that was mostly the last year.
Yeah.
But of all the things I've had, like there's like stuff I've kept quiet, like because like again, the year that I've had, there's a bunch of stuff involving like the law and like cyber stalking and all that I haven't talked about. I'm never going to talk about. That's not a get off my chest thing. That's a I'm protecting myself thing, right? But like, there's not a bunch I'm going to get off my chest. I'm never going to reveal as much as James does about his personal life, but also, honestly, just like less stuff happens. Like James goes out and meets people, and I'm just like, this spreadsheet is not done yet. So I'm gonna
Look, sometimes children are named after Adam Sandler movies in this world, and you just have to deal with the consequences of it. That's just kind of where we're at as a society.
Yeah, that's a normal sentence that someone has to say.
One I have to say, apparently. Also from Kenneth Allen, for James's retrospective corner. Arif often claims he cannot remember his bad takes because his brain forgets them to protect himself. Could
Correct.
you help him out by recalling Arif's worst ever takes?
So remember, James prepares all the show notes, so I assume he has some ready to go.
Well, the one that I can remember was how much you were in love with Dakota Dozier. And I've said this before, because that's the one that just like sticks out like a sore thumb. How much you loved Dakota Dozier, and you were a little iffy on Diggs, but thought that there was potential.
So I think you brought this up on the live show, right? This is where the Dakota Dozier thing comes from. Yeah, and I was like so confused. I was like, I like hated when I remember this. I hated when they signed him. Like, what are you talking about? And you're like, no, you love Dakota Dozier. I can bring up the episode. And I'm like, yeah, do that. What are you talking about? I think someone at the live show was like, maybe TJ Clemmings, and I was like, oh, yeah, I was way wrong about that.
Okay, my bad. It was in fact TJ Clemmings, yeah.
Yeah, and it was TJ Clemmings, but it was, and so I was like, oh yeah. The thing is, like, and maybe this is just like my endless need to be right, but like I'm not 100% confident I was completely wrong about TJ Clemmings, because the whole deal with him was that you can't rush him onto the field. And immediately every offensive lineman got injured. And so he started for like 2 years in a row when he shouldn't have been able to. So that's like part of it, is that they ruined his development, and maybe I can always kind of hide behind that. But like, I'm sure like, okay, so it's like, the problem is it's not like catastrophically wrong. It's like reasonably wrong, but I'll go with it. So when the Vikings drafted Laquan Treadwell, the guy that I really liked in that draft was Michael Thomas. So I remember that. I talk about it all the time. I'm like, hey, I really like Michael Thomas. That looks a little bit less good now because of all the injuries he's sustained. He's no longer effective. But, you know, for the first couple of years, that looked like a great take, right?
Yeah. No one was joking about a signed Michael Thomas jersey being, you know, worthless.
Right, exactly, right? And like I liked Josh Doxson, but I wasn't pounding the table for him. That was more like Luke Inman. But like I was wrong about him because I did kind of like him. And like Laquan Treadwell, I wrote a bunch of scouting reports for receivers that year because I knew the Vikings had to get one. The Vikings knew that. Turns out they grabbed one, right? So it's not like a mystery, right? And I remember with Laquan Treadwell, I put out a take that he's basically a first round quality receiver, but I'm just not that into him. And honestly, I should have dug in. I should have trusted like my instincts and been like, this guy can't get open. There's no history here with 4-7 receivers. I think he's probably a second, maybe even third round pick. But I didn't think that because I trusted the priors, right? I trusted the 5-star recruitment process. I trusted the first round grades everybody gave them, which means this is not me saying I was secretly right. This is me saying I had a bad process, so I was wrong. But I essentially said he's a first round receiver. I'm just not going to be that excited about him. But they got a good receiver. And so when they drafted him, I wrote up my like little report. I think it was on the Daily Norseman. I wrote up my report and I basically said, yeah, they got a good receiver. They upgraded. That's fine. That's a super wrong take. That's crazy wrong. It's a consensus take, but it's crazy wrong. So there's like a couple in there. Stephon Diggs, I thought people were too high on him. So in that sense, I liked him a lot, right? I thought he was a good pick. But like I thought people were way too high on him. I said, he's like a 5th round pick at receiver. Come on, relax. By the time he started blowing up in spring training, I was back in. But like, because he was doing crazy stuff in like rookie minicamp and stuff like that. And I was like, yeah, I'm good. I'm in. This guy, I rule. I love this guy. He rules, right? I rule. That's good.
I just assumed you were talking about something else. So yeah.
No, I was combining sentences. But it was like, because I didn't want to swear because I was like, I F with this guy. And then I was like, I got to change it because we don't want to swear on the podcast. But like, I love this guy, right? So I was back. But like, there was a good period of time where I was like, people are way too into this guy. Every time I fall in love with an undrafted player, I'm like wrong. I can't remember the last undrafted player that I really like stood on the table for that I was like super right about that the Vikings got. Like there are other undrafted players that I really liked for other teams that have turned out. But like my hit rate for Vikings undrafted players that I like, pretty bad. So there's that, but I wish I could name names. I
guess somebody who's listened to the shows a lot. You were pounding the table for Thielen being like remarkably well in training camp, and just be like, this guy is like out of nowhere. This is good. Keep him. But that was just based on like actually watching him. It wasn't any of the pre stuff.
Yeah. I didn't have any scouting on Thielen, so I can't claim a scouting one. I was just like, this guy's like killing it in camp. And it was actually the second year in camp. His first year in camp, he was pretty bad because he kept on dropping passes. But you know, they signed him to the practice squad, and I was like, that's good. It was him and like Rodney Smith, the 6'5" receiver from Florida State. And I remember I got into a bunch of arguments with people about Rodney Smith because they wanted him, especially that second year, 2014. Whereas Thielen versus Rodney Smith for basically the final receiver spot. And I was like, they have to give it to Thielen. They have to give it to Thielen. This Thielen guy, you know, I don't know that he'll ever turn into a starter, which fair enough, right? He ended up turning into a phenomenal starter. But like, I was like, I don't know if he'll ever turn, but he's got to get the 5th receiver. He's playing so much better than Rodney Smith. And again, and a bunch of people were like, Rodney Smith has more talent. I was like, what does that mean? Because Thielen's better at like catching the ball and like getting yards and doing stuff. Like the receivers like that advances your prospects of winning a game. So what is talent? Rodney Smith is bigger because he's not faster. Thielen's fast. He runs a 4.45. Actually, at the time he ran a 4.42, but at the regional combine he ran a 4.42, but it got entered into the database as a 4.45 because they like updated. It's like a whole thing. It's not that big. It's 0.03 seconds, but in my brain he runs a 4.42. So he's a 4.42. He ran like a 6.8 3-cone or something like that. Like he's reasonably athletic. He had a pretty good vert. Rodney Smith is tall and had a good vert, and that's it. So people saying like he got more talent like really bothered me because Thielen was just doing better. And then Teddy Bridgewater led a preseason 4th quarter comeback against the Arizona Cardinals where Rodney Smith got the touchdown. And I was like, God, I'm going to be wrong on another undrafted free agent. God, I can't believe this. Man, that's so annoying. And then Thielen got the job, and I felt really good about it. But we just turned all the way back into times I was right. This is about times I was wrong, James.
Yeah, well, I'm not surprised. This is more things for you to talk.
You're the one who brought up Thielen. That's not me. That's you. Oh, that's your fault now.
Oh, thanks. Again, something for you to discuss with your therapist. Brian Jellerson asks, congrats on making it to 500. Using strictly sports jargon and coach speak, how would you describe your journey up to this point?
Well, first, all thanks to the big guy up top, my roommate who lives above me. No, I think a lot of it really proves the value of commitment and stick-to-itiveness. Obviously, you have adversity, but it's about making sure that you use that for yourself. Don't count your reps, make your reps count. But yeah, you got to take it day by day. One foot in front of the other. And keep your eyes on the prize, right? Like, just know kind of that you're out there to compete, there to do your best. You regret every day that you don't do your best, that you don't put out your best effort. And so that's how you gotta live your life. I mean, episode 500, what an achievement! That's crazy. Definitely 500 episodes exactly, no more, no less. Why would we title the episode number anything other than that? Unless it was the 500th episode. And I frankly, I'm surprised with Guy because, again, one foot in front of the other, day by day, episode by episode, attack every episode like it's your last. And we did that. And I'm really proud of the effort that we put in. Not every episode was a winner, but every episode I put in my best effort, and you can't regret that. There's nothing I've ever said in any episode I've regretted. You
had me. I could be quiet for everything but that one. That one.
But yeah, all glory to the all powerful one, me.
It's important to note that these guys are out here every day, busting their hump. There's nobody is just sitting around here. Everybody's playing, everybody's engaged, everyone's doing what they need to be doing to make this thing a success. And it starts with discipline. This is a very highly disciplined squad based on the times that the episode always comes out by. This is something that they don't get distracted by off the field problems. They are nose to the grindstone, always working.
Everything's in-house.
Everything's in-house. This isn't something that they're not spending their whole day on social media, causing distractions or whatever. This is a group that is 100% on the ball, is working through it. Has the intangibles in this office are off the charts.
Yeah, I'd put the intangibles up against any other podcast in the league. Our leadership, our attention to detail. Our attention to detail is up there. Our rigorousness, like you said, our discipline is up there. I can't think of a better group of guys to work with, honestly. Any other podcast, you can't come up with any other better podcast, especially one that has better attention to detail, especially one that minds their P's and Q's. We always say, podcast every episode like it's your last. We want tough, physical, smart, and committed podcasters. And we got that. We have the toughest podcast room in the league.
And the one with the most stolen vehicles in a year. That's important.
That's adversity. Hey, you thrive on adversity. You want adversity, right? Because it's the only way you're going to get better, right? I needed that car to get stolen. A thing I definitely think.
Well,
how am I going to get better if my car doesn't get stolen?
Vignesh asks, do you regret this?
100%.
Well, you were podcasting next to a gigantic body pillow of yourself in Denver. That's about as close to physical regret manifesting itself next to you. So
I take accountability for everything that I do and everything that I have control over. I would never blame anybody else for my circumstances because I'm in control of my own destiny, but that is not my fault.
No, that was clearly Damian Barrett. Maximilius asks, for a Reefs, let justice be done though the heavens may fall. Corner, how many of these 500 episodes will be used against y'all as evidence in future struggle sessions or at the end of judgment? More than should. More than probably should.
All 500. I feel like I don't know that we have an exculpatory episode among them.
Boy, it'd be hard. There's a lot of information to document over 500 episodes.
Yeah, if you weigh these 500 episodes against a feather, yeah, we're failing.
Yeah. Bridge over Teddy Water asks, no better time to start planning the 1000th episode celebration. What will occur? Cooking class with Dusty? Live anime watch along with Arif? James officiating a wedding in the Ultimate Relationship Corner? Special guest appearance by Vikings legend Josh Freeman? I had joked in the Discord that we were going to get Case Cookus to appear in the Case Cookus section of the Discord. It'd be the greatest moment of all of our lives.
I would, for the 1000th episode, 10 years from now, I would watch an anime in the Discord for the first time ever. I would watch an anime with you in the Discord. And by you, I don't just mean James, but I also mean James, but also the listeners. So for the first time ever, I've never encountered the medium. People ask me, hey, have you seen Draw Play Dave's Anime Week drawings for, his bets, right? That he bets if he's wrong about a bet, he'll draw the thing. And no, I haven't. I can't see that. People have linked me, and when I click my computer, it won't load it. So I haven't seen any of it. So I haven't seen any anime. I haven't seen any stills from an anime. So for the first time ever, for the 1000th episode, I would watch an anime. Open to suggestions. I've heard something called a Cowboy Bebop. So that's a pretty popular one. In a Gundam Wing, something like that. So those are some pretty popular suggestions people have given so far.
Well, good luck with that. Enjoy that in 10 years. Kyle Segal asked a question back in 2015, remembered it wasn't answered, and then resubmitted it today. He said back in 2015, he asked this. My question is this: why was the thyme mayo in today's cafeteria roast beef red?
Kyle, I'm surprised you're alive unless you didn't actually have the thyme mayo. Thyme, by the way, is THYME. It's not like a time traveling mayo that would allow him to ask this question in 2023 about a 2015 incident, although that would be thematically appropriate. It was probably red because it had bacteria called, and I'm not looking up the pronunciation of it, so we're just going to roll. Serratia marcescens is probably what was in it. There was a long period of time where Kyle did not ask questions, and I assume the time mayo was why. Either because he traveled through time and missed that portion of time to ask us questions, or he died.
Coma. Yeah, time travel via coma. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, there you
go. Glitchy Lauren asks, question for Arif's Blitz on Numerology Corner, or Blitz while doing numerology. Per my own advanced charting, when the Vikings rush with either 3 or 6 plus defenders, they have a very high probability of, quote, kicking butt. However, when they rush 4, they have a 100% sucking butt rate. Does Flores need to further reduce the amount of 4-man rushes, or is there a glitch in my charting? There is not a glitch in my charting.
So Glitchy Lauren, I 100% I have faith in your charting. And actually, faith is the wrong word because it would suggest that I'm taking some sort of leap, that I don't know the answer, that I have to take it upon faith, right? That I have to just assume knowledge. And that's not true. Lauren has repeatedly demonstrated that she's a reliable source. So it's not even faith. I have trust based off of verification in your charting. The reason that the Vikings should not reduce the amount of the 4-man rushes has nothing to do with the incorrectness or the correctness of your charting, but rather it's they have to suck a little butt in order to kick the most butt. It's a game theory thing. You have to rush 4 sometimes, otherwise the rushing 3 and rushing 6 not going to work as much. So it's the Nash equilibrium stuff. They did a movie about it Russell Crowe was in it, but he doesn't have a sword, so I didn't watch it.
I will watch a Russell Crowe movie, but only if he has a sword. That's actually not a terrible. That's not a terrible rule to have.
Yeah, you get some good movies in there.
It turns out, this life lesson. You might be able to go somewhere with that. Interesting. All right, well, I'll try to remember that. Logan asks, question for Arif and James' relationship and gifts corner. Last year, I followed your advice to Dawn from Ohio and bought my then-pregnant wife a Peloton with scale, and she accused me of body-shaming her. What gift would you recommend that will elicit a similar response from her now that she's no longer pregnant and back to her pre-baby weight?
Oh, okay. Okay, look, I suggested that to Dawn because Dawn's wife deserves better than him. I would not have suggested that to you, except now knowing that you did that, your wife does deserve better. I think if you want to elicit a similar response, first of all, yeah, well, I'm 100% right. Your wife does deserve better. Second, do you know Jenny Craig does meal delivery services? That's all I'll say.
It's the perfect crime. Yeah, crime. That's the word for it. Also worth noting, I pointed out Dawn's fantasy team in the piece I put up on Wide Left. It's worth noting Dawn was eliminated from the playoffs.
Oh, thank God.
So Dawn and his terrible scoring, despite the fact that he had the Las Vegas Raiders as his defense, and yeah,
wow, what a fumble, dude!
He still lost. He left a lot of points on his bench.
I'm not shocked. He's never been a good coach.
No, Dawn has absolutely not been. Let's go to Skimbleshanks the Railway Cat. I think we got a couple more questions here. As we all know, a cat must have 3 different names. First of all, there's the name that the family uses daily, such as Peter, Augustus, Alonzo, or James, all of them sensible, everyday names. But a cat also needs a name that's particular, a name that's peculiar and more dignified. Of names of this kind, I can give you Quorum, such as Monksustrap, Wyo, I don't care, or Choreopia Cat, or something like Jelly Lorum. Names that never belong to more than one cat. And finally, there's still one name left over with no human research can discover, which the cat knows himself and will never confess. With all that in mind, and assuming that Arif is a cat, and we all know his everyday name, but what other names does he have?
I will say I did find it amusing that you stumbled over the pronunciations, given that of the two of us, you are the cat's expert.
Why am I the cat expert?
No, not cat expert. Cats.
Oh, the movie.
Expert.
Just because I have watched the pitch meeting on it a dozen times does not mean I'm an expert on the movie.
Between the two of us, you are. And you are closer to musical theater than I am, by virtue of being closer to music than I am.
I don't have a good response. I don't have a good response to this. All you do is listen to sad 90s music. I can't compete with this.
See? There you go. Sad and then also sadder 90s music. The two genres. I had to defend Semisonic on my timeline a couple of days ago.
I about joined in. I was like, it's
yeah, I was like, James actually feels really strongly about this.
Dan Wilson's a hero. He liked a song I wrote. Dude.
But yeah, I am not going to answer this question.
You're probably better off for it. Let's go to Logan Bolsharif, who asks, question for James's relationship corner. I am going home this Christmas, recently single, and feeling quite blah about the holiday. Tragic story. Mm-hmm. I lost most of my family who loved Christmas back when I was a teen, and it happened during Christmas. What do you recommend I look for to rekindle the true meaning and magic of the season, and happen to be the love of my life? A childhood friend who I always liked but never asked out? the local Christmas tree and holiday arts and crafts owner, or vaguely European royalty who happens to be slumming it in my hometown.
Yeah. So as soon as I saw Childhood Friend, I was like, oh, this is just a Netflix movie. And then the list expand, like it was a list, first of all, which was like crazy to me, expanded. And then I was like, oh, it's like 3 Hallmark movies for Christmas. I was like, you just mashed a bunch of them together. And then before I could get that thought out, James was like, which Hallmark movie is this?
I even had an expert on the subject read it over and just went, this is like 3 of them. I don't know which one this is.
Right. Yeah. I thought you just combined 3 of them together because there's definitely one, because I saw a Danny Gonzalez YouTube video, or maybe it was Drew Gooden, but I saw a YouTube video on bad Christmas movies, and the European royalty one, that is definitely one of them. Right. And then like the local Christmas tree and a holiday arts and crafts owner, whatever, the local business owner who like works with his hands. That's like 80 of them. Right. And then the childhood friend who I always liked but never asked out, that's another 80 of them. Right. These are like just like common tropes. You combined all 3 of them. Right. That's fine. No, it's all one. And Brandy's in it. You know, the singer. I was just like, oh, okay. But yeah, okay. I think probably the childhood friend thing, that's probably a dead end. I think that the idea that you go after a childhood friend that you'd always liked but never asked out is attempting to rekindle a relationship or kindle a relationship that should have been from when you were 2 different people. You are no longer those people, and I feel like that could cause some problems. I think you'd be better off building a relationship with someone new. So you're left with European royalty or the holiday arts and crafts owner. And I would strongly suggest the store owner, but before doing that, check the books. If it's a failing store, I'll probably go with the royalty, honestly. I don't want to be like cynical. And the whole point of these movies is that it's not about being cynical, but like, you know, the number one stressor in relationships is financial. That's all I'm saying.
Not wrong. Going off of that question, when I was trying to figure out which one it actually was supposed to be a part of, apparently there's some Netflix movie that... Netflix Best Christmas Ever, starring Brandy, Jason Biggs, and Heather Graham.
Yeah, I was like, that Brandy? And it was like, yeah, Brandy sings in it too, but Jason Biggs does not have relations with the pie. I edited that, but you know.
Yeah. So
I think you all understand.
That's the thing. We've done 500 episodes. I don't think I've had a question from this person. Arif Hassan asks, for James's relationship corner, how should one express one's true feelings to one's coworker in a stuffy and professional environment like the U.S. Senate?
Oh, that's a good question, James. a lot of tension working in the U.S. Senate.
As it turns out, and that can spur romance or incredibly stupid ideas that can lead you to getting fired and lead you to claim discrimination despite the fact that you were just being incredibly stupid. Boy.
Oh, are they claiming discrimination?
They are absolutely or one of them is claiming discrimination.
Okay, so for people who are unaware, this is going to be a hard one to explain. And like keep our iTunes rating. But for people who are unaware, 2 Senate staffers, I think is the best way to put it, right? Staffers is like not interns, but not like high up. So 2 Senate staffers took advantage of an opportunity of an empty Senate hearing room. I guess of the Senate hearing rooms, it's supposed to be a particularly prestigious one. I think people just made that up after the fact because it was funnier. But a Senate hearing room took that opportunity to express their love and affection for each other in a very primal way and filmed it. And the Daily Wire was the first one to have it, which means that most people saw this very explicit video with, or not Daily Wire, Daily Caller, with the Daily Caller branding in the corner, which that's not like every journalistic outlet brands the video, but like that is very funny to me. The idea that they would claim discrimination because they were a same-sex couple, a couple is fine, right? Like it's, I don't know how deep the relationship runs, but let's say for the moment, I'd suggest that would probably fail because I think that any heterosexual relationship in a Senate hearing that was filmed and then distributed across media would probably also result in a firing. That is my guess. But I guess I can't prove that. So that's going to be taken to a court of law, from a body of law to a court of law, I guess.
Really? That's
why I don't know. Anyway, answer the question, James. How should one express one's true feelings to one's coworker in a stuffy professional office environment like the U.S. Senate, for example?
well, the Senate still operates on like archaic systems involving like passing of notes via pages. So my suggestion would be to do the whole like, do you like me? Check yes, no, or maybe, and give it to a page, and have the page run it over to the staffer.
I like that a lot.
That would be my suggestion. But try to make sure that the page isn't involved, because there's been a lot of scandals involving pages in the U.S. Senate. So don't do that.
Yeah, actually, yeah. Just make sure the page is not the subject of the affection and is just a courier.
Yeah. So that's
very important.
That's how you handle that. Zen Cupid asks, question for Arif's Puppy Power Corner. My 7-month-old golden retriever named Taupe, named after a character in a show you've never heard called Avatar: The Last Airbender, has just entered her first heat cycle. She's mostly okay, but her appetite and interest in her food has almost disappeared. What options are available to get her to eat more consistently, or should I just wait it out for her appetite to return on its own and assume she'll eat when she's finally hungry?
I don't know why I got this question. Okay, so
I do not. I famously can't be around dogs, so it's got to be you.
Great. This is pretty common for dogs, especially female dogs entering their first heat. They tend to lose their appetite. Their hormones take over. It's very difficult to concentrate. You've been through puberty. You understand. Actually, it's actually not a terrible analogy. But yeah, so that happens, and it can be pretty alarming, and that's fair. First thing you want to do is to actually keep a journal of everything the dog eats, because it could be the case that the dog is actually eating as many calories as before, but at a different and sporadic schedule, and so it might seem like they're under eating. So you want to first confirm that. It's also important to record that, because one of the ways that people during this time kind of get around this problem is by offering dog treats. Dog treats are generally higher in caloric content than dog food. They're obviously a little bit less nutritious, but you just kind of want to get through this with enough calories. And so sometimes people will use dog treats to get around that. You do want to keep track, because, again, per unit dog treat, there's more calories. So you do want to continue keeping track of the calories that your dog consumes. You also want to make sure, because sometimes there's, especially in a first heat, sometimes there's blood. So get pet safe wet wipes, because sometimes they'll clean up the blood themselves, which usually means imbibing it, which can sometimes, replace, or it can impact the appetite a little bit. So you want to do that. But also, I don't know. I would talk to a vet. I think that makes sense. But this too shall pass.
That was some nice. Some nice answer in there. Finally, Room Bolsharif asks. By the way, it's been a full year since the Bolsharif Revolution, apparently.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, that I don't like time passing either. What was the coolest thing you ever did that no one ever actually saw?
So I couldn't think of a great example of this. There's like some stories that where a bunch of people saw, but like I've stopped telling the stories. Okay, actually, no, I'll just tell the story, because it's very stupid, and actually I'm not proud of it anymore, and no one believes it, because, and you'll figure out why nobody believes it at the end. I am probably a freshman in college. I want to say it was about that age. So I was either late high school, early college, right? Going to a movie, and I don't know if any of you remember Heelys. For people unfamiliar, and actually there's a couple of YouTube videos on Heelys that just popped up out of nowhere. But for people that don't remember, Heelys were regular shoes that you could pop wheels into, and now they're rollerblades is generous, but you can roll them.
Low rent rollerblades that you had to like lift up the top part of your foot because it was in the heel of it, thus the name Heely.
Yeah. They were difficult to control. The person who invented them wanted to like build a whole sport out of them. They quickly got banned in schools and malls. They're very dangerous. But they were pretty cool for like a hot minute. Anyway, it was also very annoying dealing with Heelys. Anyway, this kid, so I'm like in line trying to get my food at this movie theater. This kid is just zipping around, running into people, getting through the lines, just like causing all kinds of problem with the Heelys. And the parents are just like not controlling this kid at all. Like he'd run into someone, wouldn't apologize, would leave. The parent is watching, not doing anything about it. Everyone's kind of side-eyeing the parent. And like, it's like very obvious, like very Minnesotan, right? They're all like, you should do something about this, but we're not going to tell you to do something about this. You should do something about this. Right. And I am just livid. This kid's run into me 1 or 2 times and he's just like making the most obnoxious noises. He is a child, right? Like this is important to why I no longer tell the story. Speaking of getting things off my chest, I guess.
Arif the vigilante.
Yeah. And so as he like rolls across, I just stick out my leg and this kid trips and he face plants. This is an act of cruelty. This is not good. I should not harm children. In a way, he's harming himself. I could probably put up a technicality kind of morality, but we all know what the score is, right? But the thing is, he was so annoying. People clapped. And that's why I don't tell the story anymore, because no one believes a story that ends with people clapping, right? Like this happened before, like the Reddit and everybody clapped, before the Tumblr and everybody clapped meme. Like that happened, and I was like, that's cool. That like people, and I'm probably overestimating in my head how many people clapped because that's how memory works. But definitely it happened, and no one seemed upset with me except the kid and maybe the parent. And that's concerning by itself that maybe the parent was upset. That's like its own set of issues. But like, no, like as far as I can remember, no one was like upset that I committed an act of cruelty to this kid who face planted doing something dangerous, right? But a bunch of people saw that, so it doesn't really qualify to the answer to the question. There's like a bunch of things that like, and speaking of that era of the internet, like you know, the Tumblr and everybody clapped stuff, that meme. There was a bunch of websites, and My Life is Average is one of them. And this is basically what this question is, right? Because like Text from Last Night, F My Life, you know, all of those websites kind of popped up around the same time. My Life is Average is one of them, where people would tell stories that were not like that impressive, but nobody saw it. It was kind of cool, so you kind of wanted a record of it. And so stuff like, you know, I was walking and I was wearing my hat, but the wind was strong, so the wind blew the hat off of my head and I caught it with my foot and kicked it up and it landed back on my head and nobody saw it, like that kind of stuff, right? And that's basically what this question is asking. And I can't think of one that really fits that.
I kind of have one.
Sure.
But mine was in college, and like outside of this, like the only things I can think of are like I have ridiculous dad reflexes that I just catch things without seeing it. So like I do that.
I do that. I love that.
That's about as good as I get. And people are like, oh, nice catch. It's like, yeah, this is nothing. This happens 3-4 times a day.
This is normal.
Yeah, my hands are crap. I just figure it out and just move around it like it happens. But
I'll say I'll let you finish.
So I had a moment in college where the bar that we hung out in college, they were like the jukebox wasn't working, and it was like pushed out. Because somebody was back there trying to like work on it, and then they left and they hadn't moved it back. And the bartender, it was over by the dartboard where I was at, and he asked if I could push it back. And while I had moved it back, I had managed to like smack it hard enough where it turned on. So that was like my Fonz moment. It was like
that rules.
I fixed the jukebox.
I love that one.
I fixed the jukebox just by like accidentally smacking it. Yeah. That was
that's awesome.
Just me and the bartender in the bar and nobody else, because you know why? Waiting for the rest of my friends to show up at 7 p.m. because that's when you start drinking in college.
I did when I was young. I still do actually, but it's not as strong anymore because I'm not as strong anymore. But I used to have like a ridiculous sense of balance, and you know, it helps having a low center of gravity. I mean, I'm very tall now, obviously, but if you can't believe it, I was
before the growth spurt. Yeah.
right. Yeah. So if you could believe it, I was quite short as a youngster. But I had a really, really great sense of like I would very rarely fall. And I don't know if it was because I did gymnastics when I was young or there's something genetic or whatever. Right. But I do remember like my mom just like didn't, and anybody who's ever had contact with my mom would not be shocked by this, did not trust this fact at all, did not believe I would ever be safe doing anything.
Sorry, I've had contact with your mom.
Yeah, not shocking at all, right?
Which is fun out of context or in context, actually.
Right, yeah. But like, I would like never take a spill. Like there were like moments I like distinctly remember falling in middle school where I actually like hit the ground and I was shocked. Like in middle school I would like slip on some ice and I had to brace myself and catch myself with my hands. And I was like, I just sat there for like 3 minutes because like I never fall. And like a bunch of people are like, are you all right? Oh my God, you haven't gotten up yet. And I'm just like, this doesn't happen. Like that's like, and so that's the context for, we all went to Bangladesh in the Sundarban forest, which is like, there's like, it's a forest. It's more of a jungle, but they call it a forest. But like, there's a bunch of wildlife there. It's in the river delta of the Ganges. It's like, this huge deal. It's a nature preserve. And some of the only Bengal tigers left in the world are there, right? Which is like super cool. So I want to like explore on my own. And my mom is like, absolutely not. And I just told you there's a bunch of Bengal tigers there, so that seems pretty reasonable. Honestly, it's not, because there aren't any tigers in the area that we're at. And there's a ton of cameras. And so you don't have to worry about it that much. And that's not even the reason my mom was, if she had said, hey, I'm worried about tigers, you should stay with the group. Like that, 100% reasonable, right? Even as a kid, I would have been like, yeah, I get it. But that wasn't the reason. The reason she gave was, you'll fall. And I was like, what are you talking about? Never happens. And my brother was with us at the time. My brother was like, what? What? What happens if he falls? We're in mud. Like what is the concern here? And I was like, absolutely not. I'm never going to fall. So I just like wander off on my own. And I see this like tiny baby deer. It's the cutest thing I've ever seen in my life. This tiny baby deer. And it's just like all alone. Obviously what's happened is that the group shows up and scares off the parent, right? This thing is helpless. And I'm like, I want to see it. So like I walk up to it. The mud is super sticky. And I begin to fall. And I'm going to fall on this baby deer. This thing that is so young, it can barely walk, right? Like most mammals besides humans can walk almost immediately after they're born. And I am not confident this deer is at that step, even though I know they can do it hours after they're born, right? This thing is tiny. I am a child, and if I fall on it, it could die, right? And I'm like walking towards it, and the mud is sticky, and I begin falling, right? And I'm like, oh my God. And so I'm like, I cannot. The first thing I do when I run away from my parents because they won't let me run away is kill a baby deer by falling, because she was concerned. I was like, my brain is, as I'm falling, my brain is processing and how stupid this is, right? Like, this is like cartoon sitcom type stuff, right? Where like, of course, this is what happens.
I'm not going to fall and then immediately fall.
And kills a deer, right? Like, I can't. So I'm like, I'm falling and I'm like, this can't happen. And so I twist myself to like get it, because I'm just going to fall not on the deer, right? Like I've got a choice here, right? So I twist myself to not fall on the deer. But as I'm twisting myself, I regain my balance and my foot lands on, it doesn't trip over, it lands on the trees because the deer is like nudged up against a tree. It's like in the shadow of the tree. It's like huddled up against it as if the tree could provide warmth. Obviously what happened is that the parents, but like as I'm twisting myself, my foot lands on the tree root, which is relatively speaking dry, and it's definitely solid compared to all the mud. And so I jump off of that and I spin and I land on my feet. It was the coolest. Now that like we've had this Now that you mentioned the reflexes, I was like, oh, I have a reflex story. Yeah, I landed on my feet, spinning away, jumping off of a tree root to not kill this baby deer that I almost fell on. It was the coolest thing. Nobody saw it because I ran away from everybody.
I mean, to be fair, it was your family, and that seemed reasonable.
That's pretty reasonable. Yeah.
Which is also to say, tell your brother I say hi when you see him.
Yeah, will do.
Well, that's going to be it for this episode of Norse Code. Hope you've enjoyed Norse Code 500. We will be back later this week with a preview of the Lions game. So, Arif, what do you have to plug?
Over at Wide Left Substack, I wrote a really lengthy recap of the Bengals game because I wanted to talk about a lot of the stuff that were going to be storylines throughout the week, put it all in one story. It's 4,000 words. I talk about the quarterback sneak. I talk about the play calling. I talk about Nick Mullins and why you should stick with him, even though he didn't play all that well. All of that stuff. I've got the Luke Braun piece coming up pretty soon about quarterback sneaks. It goes in a little bit more detail. I don't know if James is going to write a thing.
Oh, yep. I've got the preview for that. Should be ready for Thursday morning. So
cool.
We'll be talking more about the Hell League playoffs.
I've got a Ty Chandler piece coming up for zone coverage in a little bit too. So all of that's coming up pretty soon. Check that out. Follow me on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL.
So that's it for this episode. Hope you guys enjoyed it. We'll be back later this week. So for Arif, my name is James. Thank you guys so much for listening. And please remember that Christian Ponder sucks. And you should probably put that in a garage next time. And we will be back later this week. Norse Code is the largest and only division of Norse Code LLC. You can find Norse Code on the Daily Norseman, SB Nation's Vikings blog at dailynorseman.com. You can also find it on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play Music Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever fine podcasts are aggregated. Our Vikings blogger extraordinaire and generally useful human is Arif Hassan. And he can be found on Twitter at Arif Hassan NFL. I am your producer and co-host, and my name is James Pagashnik. You can find me at the show's official Twitter feed at NorseCodeDN. If you'd like to donate a few bucks to the show, you can make your one-time donation at paypal.me/NorseCode, or a recurring monthly contribution can be made by visiting patreon.com/NorseCode. Any questions or comments that won't fit in a tweet can also be sent to NorseCodePodcast@gmail.com. On behalf of the Norse Code staff, we thank you so much for listening.
Our formula is this. We go out, we hit people in the mouth.